What's up, everybody? Welcome to Ink, Drink, Think, episode 4. Today, we're going to drop some flashbacks because we're talking all things Flash today. I'm your host, Michael Pickard, and today I'm joined by my wonderfully talented co hosts and friends, Sans Johnny Wise, because he couldn't join us today. Nate Wells. Nate, you're up.
Hey, what's up, guys? Nate Wells. I'm gonna be drawing some Flash today. Really excited. I don't flaw. I don't flaw the drash that often. Only had one beer. I don't draw Flash that often. I do enjoy the character a lot. I'm excited to get into this. Going to do a little bit of a costume tweak, redesign. Not too much of a departure, but yeah, I am excited. I've got the pencils done. I'm excited to get into inking this guy.
Cool. What are you drinking tonight?
Tonight, I'm drinking the national beer of Texas. Got a Shiner Bock going. These are amazing if you've never had one.
No, I never have.
Oh, it's good. It's real good.
Joining us also is our fellow co host and teacher Todd himself, Todd Blackwood. Todd, you're up.
Hey, everybody. This is going to be an interesting one for me because, as I may or may not have said before, I went digital only. I'm pretty recent to digital. It's been about a year and a half now since I jumped on Procreate. But I did a Flash drawing with markers a while back. And when I was first trying to learn Procreate, one of the things that I do consistently is take a lot of my old marker drawings and put them into the Procreate system and try to digitize them. And this is one that I did a long time ago, and kind of hit a wall and realized I was in over my head, although I don't think it was the worst thing I've ever done. And now I'm taking another crack at it, and I'm curious to compare the three and see if I've learned anything or not. Who knows? Could go sideways. You never know. But there's my original marker drawing, and then I've done some prep with doing like the basic shapes that I'll then render over, so that this should be finished or something like finished by the end of the episode.
Awesome, man. I'm psyched to see that.
Yeah, and we'll talk about some speed lines, because who better to do speed lines than the Flash?
Absolutely. There's nobody better to talk about speed lines about other than the Flash, the original OG speedster himself. And like I said, guys, I'm Michael Pickard. Tonight I'm going to be working on this Flash versus Reverse Flash drawing. For anybody who's watching the screen, you're going to see that it's flipped. When you see the finished product, it'll be correctly placed, so it's not going to look like zooms. Lightning bolt is going to be incorrectly directioned, but yeah. And then tonight I'm having some blue moons, so on my second one, and I'm quite excited to get cracking on some speed lines. So, as we've kind of touched upon, one of the first things I wanted to talk about today, which is one of the reasons we're doing the Flash to begin with, is speed and movement. And of course, in cartooning, speed lines are the most commonly accepted way of showing movement. But to you two, I want to ask, what techniques are you implementing into your pieces to illustrate movement and speed through the figure of the Flash?
Not speed lines.
Not speed lines? Is that what you said?
Not speed lines. Yeah, I'm always a little nervous about speed lines. I feel like they're gonna get all crisscrossy and not look very good. So I try and avoid like directional lines and speed lines really as much as I can. So what I decided to do was draw these three different panels that are sort of, in comics you read this would be like an increment of time. These would be different actions, but I've got Flash's figure crossing over all of the panels, and he's got all his lightning effects going also into all the panels. I think I'm even just gonna break the panel borders with the lightning. And so that's how I kind of wanted to play with time. And this one is like do a little bit more storytelling with it rather than try and draw speed lines and be really unhappy with the drawing. But I'm really happy with the pencils, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Oh no, on Nate's piece, I just wanted to say I thought that as we were talking about before we started recording, uh, using that triptych kind of layout to show movement of time and then have him intersecting all of them is so genius.
Yeah.
Like I think it's one of the best ways to illustrate that movement through visual storytelling.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What about you, Todd? What are you doing?
Well, in a way I'm in an easier position than you guys because I'm digital, so I can experiment and see what works and what doesn't. So I'm actually not entirely sure how I'm going to do this, but I also think it's really important to think your drawing through before you do it. So I'm in theory going to put some speed lines in the background, but Procreate also has a cheat tool called motion blur, which I might or might not use. I'm not really sure. For one thing, Procreate got an update, which I just noticed yesterday, and I pushed update, and all of a sudden everything's slightly different. So I'm not quite as deft at this as I or familiar with it as I usually am, if that makes sense. So I've tried to go do a few things, and I'm like, what's that? But one thing I don't like about my old drawing is that the speed lines are coming out of the circle he's in, and I always kind of felt like that was a mistake on my part. So I'll probably do some sort of blurring lightning action coming off his costume and speed lines behind him and see what works and what doesn't. We shall see.
Wait, I may have just missed
I feel
this.
like that's
Are you
kind
going
of
to
just
use
the show.
Say that
yeah, Nate's right. Yeah, well, I guess we'll see what happens. But I missed one part of what you just said. Are you going to use the lightning to like trail off through
in
the portrait?
Well, I'm gonna keep it all within the circle, I think, this time.
Oh,
But
okay.
otherwise, yeah, I'm gonna have lightning going on from his costume of some kind. Lightning's actually one of my new favorite things to do. And one of the reasons for that, I actually make patterns. So like I'll take a stock image and make patterns out of it, and then I'll have like a stock lightning bolt that I've drawn. That every once in a while I'm like, hey, I want a lightning bolt in the background of that panel, and I'll stick it in. But then you can play with it. So I'll show you guys something that's really fun about Procreate is a tool called Liquify. Oh, where'd it go? There it is. And so can you see what I'm doing here? So like it, okay, that doesn't
Oh,
really
weird.
make the case for it. But believe it or not, if you're doing lightning, you can get some really interesting things going on. Let me see if this is better. Off the alpha lock. And all right, we're gonna twirl. Can you see that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's fascinating.
Obviously, I wouldn't do that for the Flash, but it's really fun to experiment. Like you can do stuff like that, and you can get some really wacky designs. You can expand and shrink and do weird little crystals. And it took me a while to figure out whether I would use something like that or not. But once I kind of started getting familiar with it, I really enjoyed the things. And if you look at my drawings, you might start picking out. You're like, oh, I bet he used the Liquify tool on that, for instance. I also found a site that has great brushes. Somebody was asking me if I ever use brushes or import brushes, and I don't. I modify my own. But then you got me thinking, and so I started thinking what I might want, and I got a bunch of these line tool brushes that I'm kind of excited about. You can't see that, but they do like that kind of thing.
Oh, that's cool. Like multi-pens in one hand almost.
Yeah, like you got to kind of know what you want to use it for, but one area that's really great is hair. And there's tons of variations on it. So I'm still playing with that. But anyways, so what do you I'll let you guys take the conversation because I'm kind of rambling now.
No, it's fine. I'm pretty much just doing traditional speed lines to some extent.
Yeah.
Based off my thumbnail, I'm going to go in after I do work with my pen and do some thicker strokes just to give it some variation in the speed lines. I definitely goofed up at the beginning of how I was doing these speed lines in this top corner. So I'll probably have to wipe that out and redo them or just white it out and ignore that area. But not too big of a deal. I'm just kind of playing around with it at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a fluidity that I wanted from them, and that area where I first started, like I probably should have done some tests right before I jumped into the inking of the speed lines, but not the end of the world.
Yeah.
There's no turning back now,
cool.
so I just have to problem solve on the fly.
You'll get there.
That's the name of the game.
Yeah. So everyone who's watching, you might have seen this at the beginning of the episode, but I am in fact wearing a Flash shirt. I'm a pretty diehard fan of the Flash. He, as I was explaining to the guys, is a character that I've not only loved since I was a kid, but also was important in my rediscovery of comics as a teenager and has led me down this path to where I am right now. And so this piece is really important to me, just from the standpoint of I've never really attempted to do a finalized Flash piece. Technically, that's a lie. I tried once, and it was so horrible that I never posted it. And this was years ago. This was back in college, but it was so bad that I didn't attempt it, or I didn't attempt to finish it, and I never posted any of its progress. So to me, this is almost like a test of how far I've come as an illustrator. To prove to myself I can illustrate this character who I'm very passionate about. So,
well, it's a common theme that it sounds like for today.
Yeah, absolutely.
High stakes.
Yeah. How did you first discover the Flash? Like, what was your intro to him, or your gateway?
So, I was just telling Nate about this, but as a kid, and I found this in my adulthood on eBay, but we had a book in my house, and it was a booklet of papercraft masks that you could assemble that were all DC characters. And one of the characters in the book was the Flash. And I can't remember all of the ones that my dad had assembled for my brother and I, because I assume that it was tedious and time-consuming, even for the low-poly 3D models that they were. Just to assemble them and glue them together was probably a nightmare. But I think we did have the Flash one assembled. And as a kid growing up, red was always one of my favorite colors. And so that iconography of that mask is just like ingrained in my head as something that like I'm like drawn to. Yeah. But then also, as I showed you guys in the Instagram chat, one of the first books I could ever read was a Flash storybook that was the origin of Wally West. And it covered him as Kid Flash, and it went into elements of the death of Barry Allen and Wally having to grow up and take the mantle and like handle all of these supervillains on his own. And just as a kid, like one of the first books I could ever read, I probably read that book countless times over and over again. And I'm surprised that the stitching is still held together, the stapling, just based on how loved that book was.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so for me, the Flash was always a character I really loved. And then, of course, I grew up with the DC animated universe with Justice League Unlimited and the Flash and that. Man. Just such a great kid appeal character and his humor that there was no way I wasn't going to instantly be drawn to that character in particular. So of course that only helped in it. And then I was just saying to you guys before we started recording, when I was a teenager, and I'd always wanted to do comics professionally, but I wasn't reading them. It wasn't something that was just easily accessible in my life. Like we didn't have a local comic book shop. Um, I went to one just out on a whim, and I saw that they had an issue of The Flash, and this was during the New 52. And it just immediately caught my eye, and I was like, oh, well, what a perfect character to get into comics with, because that's the one I have always loved. And
yeah,
it just totally sent me down the rabbit hole and got me to where I am today. So, big fan of The Flash. Very nervous that I'm going to ruin this piece, but we'll see what happens.
Ah,
It's kind of the fun of doing analog is that I kind of have to, the pressure is on a bit. Like I can't just click undo
yeah,
as much as that would be nice. But I think this, like I said, this as a testament of how far I've come as an artist would be cool to see when I'm finished it.
Those Tony Salmon's drawings you were showing me earlier made me want to do analog again. I was like, man, that makes me want to get out my ink like and brushes and stuff really bad.
Absolutely.
There's still, as much as I love digital, there's still nothing like real actual hand drawing.
Todd, do you have one of the screen protectors that makes your iPad feel like paper?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I could not recommend them higher. I really do.
I have been wanting to get one.
Oh, you don't have one? I really think.
No, I'm just drawing on the screen.
It's like drawing on glass and in a bad way.
Yeah.
Without it,
Right.
And like it just I've heard a lot of people say, oh, it's not the tools you use, it's how you draw and stuff, and I'm actually kind of mixed feelings about that. I actually do think certain tools are essential, and one of them for me that I'm sure I would have powered through it somehow, but like having this paper like texture to this is like I couldn't, makes me really happy. Yeah. So yeah, if you're gonna do an iPad, draw on an iPad with a pencil, like I think it makes it feel more organic, and that to me is the real goal of any digital work, is to keep it as organic seeming as possible. You don't want it to look like it was drawn by a robot, for instance, which I think digital drawing can tend to take a can come across as. Like one of the things I love when people ask me is they're like, is that digital or did you paint that? And I'm like, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear you say that. I'm doing something right, that if you can't tell. Hopefully.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like if you can make the digital work almost seamlessly look as if it were done in a traditional medium, I think that's a testament to what you can do with that digital technology.
Yeah. Well, and in a way, I'm glad I got into it as late as I did, because I feel like the Procreate tool for me was the right tool. It was like the right time and place for me, because I started transitioning from being a traditional line art type of guy in my drawings, but there was a frustrated painter inside of me, and I think that's one of the reasons why I can't pencil traditional comics, is because it's just not how I think. And when I started doing this ink washing, gray toned Copic marker drawings, it was like the first steps on the road of like, like I did all these drawings that I kind of refer to as banging my head against the wall, where I was like, man, if only I could do this, or how do I figure out how to do that? But I was having to mask things off, and just doing a lot of, I would really destroy my studio when I would work that way. And digital keeps things much more pared down and easier to keep track of. I definitely don't want to ever stop doing traditional, but anyways, I do think Procreate is. I would be curious to see if there are any other drawing programs I would like as much, because I do think Procreate is if you're gonna do it, that's my cause.
I really like Fresco. That's what I've been using to color Ray Gun Cowboy.
Yeah.
I downloaded a bunch of brushes recently that have really helped too. I love Procreate as well. I tried Clip Studio for a little while, which I also really enjoyed. I thought drawing in Clip Studio, because of the brushes I had and the way I tweaked them, felt a little better than Procreate. But it's also as complex as Photoshop. Procreate's so simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's all these menus and everything in Clip Studio. But that's what I like about Fresco is it's got the design sort of like simplicity that Procreate does, but it's also Adobe, and so I can just save to the Creative Cloud and pull a file up on Photoshop, save it, and get it immediately again back on my iPad, which just for workflow reasons is phenomenal.
Right. Huh. Wait, so Fresco is a program?
Yes, it's the Adobe answer to Procreate.
Oh wow, I'll have to check that out. I'm sure I've heard of it, but at the time when you said it before, I thought you were talking about a style of painting. So I'll have to look into that. I'll be curious.
Yeah, it was originally called Adobe like Gemini or something, and they renamed it when it finally launched to Fresco.
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I applied for like several times to like beta test it, and they were like, "You're not important enough to do that." Like, all right, that's cool.
Yeah.
Like, you're right, but come on.
Give me a shot, man.
Yeah.
You should have drawn Batman. That'll get you the attention that you want.
Right?
Yeah.
What do you guys use for lettering? Do you do hand lettering, or I know I'm taking a divergence here, but do you use a program?
I use Illustrator, and I use a font. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Which is probably the most like
digitally as well.
Which I know is probably like the worst thing to say to anybody who like loves traditional lettering.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I use a font, but I don't have the handwriting and I don't have the patience to really perfect that skill.
Does. Even the most well-known letterers these days have gone digital, I think, and adopted. Nate, you said that you do digital too?
I do. And I've played around with different fonts, but a lot of times it's just I kind of do it at the same time I'm doing the coloring of a page. I'll just kind of go in and drop the letters in that way. When I worked in when I was a political cartoonist, because it was just kind of like one kind of like line joke, or maybe like just like one back and forth dialogue, I would hand letter all of that just with the pen that I drew it in. But any kind of like longer form, I've never trusted myself to, I think, really have the consistency that I would want to do to letter like an entire book, because I would want it to be consistent. I don't trust myself to do that. With practice, I'm sure I could get there.
Are you talking about hand lettering? In other words, like you could do it digitally, but hand lettering you would be too wary? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So
because sorry, go on.
Program? Tell me again which program you use for lettering, or you said it's a bunch of different things and not any one.
Yeah, right now it's just kind of like Photoshop / Adobe Fresco that I do all of that stuff, and like coloring and lettering kind of at the same time.
Yeah. Because the reason I ask is because I was I am doing a album cover for somebody, and they asked if I did lettering and logos, and I was like, sure. and then I realized I can kind of fake it, but I'm in over my head, which I think I was maybe should have been slightly clearer on, but they liked my art and just happened. I kind of more volunteered for it. But I started looking at fonts and thinking about, because like with the ghost stories I'm going to do, I will letter that myself. And so I'm trying to get serious about how I'm going to letter a comic and trying to also convince myself that I can letter a comic in Procreate, which should be interesting. But I don't know if there's any other program that would necessarily be easier. Although, wouldn't surprise me if I tried something like Clip Studio and was like, "Oh man, this is way better." But I don't know. We shall see.
Yeah, I enjoyed Clip Studio. I would say if you're comfortable in
Yeah.
Procreate, I would just do that. Me personally.
Yeah.
But yeah, I tried
uploaded
Procreate when I
some-
first got my iPad. I tried Procreate first, and I loved it. But I'd seen a couple other people using like Clip Studio, and so I was like, oh, I'll kind of try that out, see if I like it better. And I did use that a little while for my more professional stuff because it allows you to create way larger files. It'll really bog the program down sometimes, but you can use bigger file sizes in Clip Studio.
Really?
Yeah, then you can improve. I was having to like segment when I was doing movie posters mostly, and so I was having to like sort of like make an entire file for a layer, so that it would be at full size. And that just got really frustrating.
Yeah. Well, see, I'll do that like with this Flash image. I will show you. So, like, here's my Flash image, but I went and did a separate Flash image. And I'll do a lot of separate images. And of course, I traced it. You can see my process right there. And but then I'll take that and trying to do all that within the other Flash drawing I'm already doing would make my computer explode.
Right. Yeah. And that just gets so frustrating, especially when you're working and it's going really well. And then something like freezes up, or they're like, nope, you can't have any more layers. And you're just like, fuck.
Yeah. It's part of the learning curve with Procreate, at least, is like,
absolutely.
Like there's little math problems you kind of have to do. It's like, wait, how come I can't draw on this layer? Why is this layer? Like I actually just was trying to lay the Flash's skin tone on his red costume, and for some reason it should like lay in there perfectly, but it wouldn't do a clipping layer, and so it became this big blob, and I had to redraw it. But I was surprised because I kept pushing buttons and thinking, oh, I can figure this out, but I still am not sure what happened. But that's how you learn, I guess. There's no mistakes, only happy, valuable learning experiences.
Especially on Ink Drink Think.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been toying with the idea of doing a digital piece for one of these episodes. I'm sort of developing character designs for a new comic, at least pitch right now, with a writer I've worked before that I really like named Chase Hahn. Shout out Chase, love you, man.
Nice.
That I'm really excited about, and I always do concept stuff digitally because it's just so easy to change anything. And I used to not, and I would get notes back, and I would have to like scan and blue line and reprint things just to tweak like one thing, and have to redraw almost the entire thing. It just got really frustrating.
Yeah.
Especially we Chase and I actually, with our first comics pitch, we also developed a pitch for an animated series in the same world. And so doing a few sample like background paintings for that show, and storyboarding was just so much easier digitally. Because that's just the way to do it. Like you're insane if you don't do it digitally. So that's actually when I bought the iPad. I was like, I'll use this because it'll be friendly with my laptop. And took hours and hours and hours off of my my workload. So I love my iPad.
There's storyboarding, like there's like you're constantly revising and changing things if you're doing it commercially. And I couldn't imagine trying to do all those changes by hand.
That's what I did for Ultramax. I did all of the I did most of the development by hand just because of my inking style. I didn't want to falsely articulate something, as in, oh, this is how the character will look, and then not be
Well,
able to present that
yeah,
same visual style, if that makes sense.
yeah, but that's a creator-owned project between you and the writer, correct?
Yep. Hmm.
Yeah. See, to me, like that makes more sense on a certain level, because you guys know what you want and you're deciding it. But when you're working for a client, or a director or somebody, like it's like one of the things that drives me crazy about it is I don't know what I want, so you draw something and I'll tell you if you did it right. And it's like
Hmm.
it's like I can be indecisive, working and writing on my own stuff, and God bless him and everything, but like, man, um I don't know. I think I just wiped
Yeah,
out
it's
with
so
my thought.
frustrating. That's so frustrating, though. Exactly what you were saying when you get something that's like really vague, so you kind of have fun with it and just make what, and they're like, no, that's not at all what I was thinking.
Yeah,
And you just kind of reply with, well, you didn't tell me
it's
anything
like
that you wanted to
yeah,
see.
you don't know what you're thinking, so when you figure it out, you let me know. But like, meanwhile,
Yeah,
Yeah,
commissions can be the same
absolutely
way.
tell me if this is just not in the right ballpark, but
yeah,
don't be upset,
yeah,
because you didn't give me anything to work off of.
yeah.
Well, also,
I
like,
have a
I'm sorry,
uh,
this is a, a
yep,
funny bit, but um, it's also a matter of like sometimes you'll get reached out to by individuals either looking to collaborate or
right,
looking for freelance work, and they will pay no attention to what you do or what your style is.
yeah,
And so, like, I recently had a, a company reach out to me and they were like, hey, we're looking for some graphic design work. Would you be interested? Or technically,
uh-huh,
they said illustration work. And I was like, oh, yeah, well, firstly, like, have you seen my body of work? Like, you know what kind of illustration I do, like, particularly comic book
yeah,
art. And they're like, oh, yeah, well, thank you for providing your website. But we're really looking for somebody to do illustrations for, like, these knockoff, like, Disney Pixar's cars. We're looking for
Mm.
somebody to do decals that look similar to that. I was like, then why did
huh.
you reach out to me? Like, well, you reached out to me. I didn't come to you looking for the job. I just told you what I do.
How did they find you, on Instagram or
They
like
reached out to me
LinkedIn
on
or?
LinkedIn, but it was still funny.
Oh,
It was
okay.
like, what are you
Yeah,
doing? Like,
yeah, that is interesting. Because like this album cover that I'm doing, like this guy saw, so basically he saw a haunted house drawing and he was like, that's what I want. So that was cool, like he wasn't like, that looks great, can you draw a cartoon car with big eyes and on its hubcaps,
Yeah.
yeah.
he was like, I want what you do. And that's always, in theory, what you want, but it's not how it always works out. Did that peter out then for you, Michael? Like, or is it still up in the air, or?
No, no, no. This was a couple months ago. I told them I
Ah,
was like, oh, I don't think this is something I'm a good fit for. Not that I couldn't have done
yeah,
it out of my prior design and job experiences, but it's not
yeah,
really the direction I'm trying to go towards. Um,
yeah. It's hard to say no. It's a good
Hmm.
skill to develop, because like for me, when I first started in doing a lot of things, it was kind of like you have to eat every item of food on your plate, and it's like, no, sometimes if a project's not right for you, it's okay to be like, I'm not going to do that. But it can be difficult.
oh yeah, absolutely. Well, especially when, for me, it was difficult just out of the standpoint of like, this was prior to launching the Ultramax campaign on Kickstarter. Go check it out. But
Yeah,
um, this was prior to that, so I didn't know what the success was going to be of the book or anything.
right.
But making the decision of saying like I've made a commitment to this book and like I have faith in the project that I'm working on, like that I really want
Yeah,
to commit the time to it, you know?
right. Exactly. I think though now is the right time to do it.
Oh yeah,
I think
definitely.
that I think things in comics are shifting. I have no idea what that means exactly, but I do think that crowdfunding for books is going to be the wave of the future. You know, and if nothing else, it's going to be great practice for you guys, and you know, you're going to learn something really valuable. I think you're also going to probably overshoot your goal eventually, but I think you'll be, you know, every campaign you do after that is going to be more and more successful. That's my prediction.
Well, thanks, Todd. I'm glad you have such faith in me.
Yeah, no, I mean it. I don't bullshit people. But yeah, I think there's some people that are kind of opposed to that stuff, and I don't think that's I think they're kind of in the wrong mindset, maybe a little bit. I don't think it's a bad thing.
Yeah, and to your point, I do think that right now is the time to launch crowdfunding for comics, because
Yeah.
One of the things, like, we were like, while we were still developing the book, several other professional creators such as Jeff Lemire and Scott Snyder launched their own Kickstarter campaigns for books, and they, of course, being successful comic book artists with large fan bases, almost immediately surpassed their goals for their campaigns, and so they both made more than $100,000 for their projects, which in terms of the finances of comics nowadays is almost unheard of. Like, no books really make that much money anymore, and so I think that was kind of like the telltale sign of, like, this is the future. Like, this is a means for creators to really get themselves financial backing to get their books created.
Yeah. Well, but I think the reason why mainstream companies are going to feel threatened by it is because it's also driving home why it's important to own your own work.
Yeah.
And that I think is going to be, you know, the real kicker. Is it's like, you know, why drawing comics is so hard. I don't care what anybody says. And don't get me wrong, we all want to draw Spider-Man, or, you know, or have our fan favorite, but, like, you're never going to own that stuff. And if you have an idea and something that you love doing, like Hellboy's a great example of, it's all the fun stuff that Mike Mignola wanted to draw, and he decided to go with it, and it blew up into one of the best comics ever made. It's iconic, you know, at this point. But I think I told you guys this before, but I was shocked because I was watching an interview with him and his wife, and he actually did one miniseries of Hellboy, and was all ready to pack up and go back to begging for work at Marvel, and his wife talked him out of it. And I had never heard that before, and I figured he did that Hellboy miniseries and was like, I'm never going back, you know.
Yeah.
I was really surprised. And I think that's really inspirational of why it's important to stick it out and you know, figure out what you love drawing and do that. Like, for me, I had to kind of remind myself why I wanted to do this stuff in the first place. And so that's why it's fun to talk about things like The Flash, is because it brings up it's so much fun nostalgia, that also just reminds you of good experiences of, like, you know, those books you read that made you go back to the library as a kid, that made you love going to the library, or whatever. Yeah, The Flash is a classic.
Yeah,
Anyways.
absolutely. And even, like, to the point you even just said, like, I have a pitch that I'm going to present to you guys in a little bit, that even some of the elements of the pitch that I have, which I'm not going to present here, I've already used as or teased as possible elements to use in the universe of Ultramax if we ever decide to make a sequel for it. But to the same point, it's like I have some ideas for characters similar to, or that would be analogs to Flash characters, like villains and whatnot, that I'd rather use as my own intellectual property as opposed to selling it to a company and only getting some residuals, you know. But I also do understand like the prestige that would come and the honor that would even come from getting to work on a mainstream character like that. Like, I'm sure any of us in the podcast and any other artists watching who are hoping to become professional comic book artists would die for the chance to illustrate Spider-Man or the
Maybe.
Flash or Batman.
Yeah, I know what you mean by that. Yeah. Like for me though, that my attitude used to be like that, but now it's changed to I would do it if they let me do what I wanted.
Yeah.
So like not only would I love to do, for instance, Spider-Man, but there's a very specific story I'd like to do with Spider-Man. And I think it would have to be a one-off. I'd have to do it the way I would want to do it. You know, there's uh like I told you guys last week, I'd love to do a the complete Frank Miller animated Daredevil. Like take all that stuff and really do it seriously. Like that's one of two specific Daredevil projects I'd kill to drop everything, so shall we say, to do. You know, and Batman, like I have ideas developed in my head about what I would do if I was approached. But for me, the thing that's changed is I want to reestablish myself as a certain type of artist, and then have them, if it wouldn't break my heart if I never drew Batman, don't get me wrong, believe it or not, I can always do fan drawings, but I would want them to come to me and go, we want you to do what you do with Batman, as opposed to we want you to assimilate into the way Batman is done, so to speak. Some people are built for that. I'm not, is my take on that.
That completely makes sense, though, particularly with your art style, because you, in your older work, not that you work in a house style, but like your older body of work is much more traditional. But the stuff you're doing now is much more expressive in your own. That why would you turn back on it?
I used to work in a house style, but I wasn't very good at it. Is my take. And I kept thinking, I felt like there were things in my work that I don't know if I would say they stood out, but they felt personal to me. I was like, oh, there's me in that. But I would see that start disappearing when I was trying to do samples to get work at Marvel or DC or whomever. And, you know, for a period, I felt like I was kind of lost, where I couldn't figure out what to do with myself, or how to, you know, get out of that mindset of there's no point in drawing if you're not trying to get work at Marvel, so to speak. So yeah, that's one reason why I started focusing on the ghost stories and things, is I started thinking, you know, I can draw whatever I want, I just have to figure out what that is. And I realized that would make me very happy if that's what I'm end up being, shall we say, known for.
It's interesting that comics are one of the few storytelling mediums that creators are typically not making their work self-created, if that makes sense. For example, like in comics, most people are trying to get work doing, or traditionally, other than like the movement for creator-owned work, it's all based in, oh, I want to work on that character, I want to work for one of these larger publishers. Whereas with like writing, like authors don't like look for like, oh, I want to get that Harry Potter spin-off book, you know?
Yeah, it's a strange thing, isn't it? You know, it's to me, it's an odd thing that superhero comics specifically developed, of, oh, Jack Kirby's leaving Fantastic Four, so somebody else is going to take over, as opposed to, you know, that book, maybe, I'm glad it didn't end, don't get me wrong, but the changing of hands of all the artistic contributors there's, like, I think you're saying, there's no other medium I can think of where that happens, you know. Maybe with movies it's different directors and writers, and I guess like Star Trek or Star Wars would apply. It's not like George Lucas does all of it himself, thank goodness. But yeah,
it's funny because in that same sense, like you have a great point. Like Jack Kirby helped make a book successful whether it was Fantastic Four or any of the other Marvel work that he had done. And then he left the project and moved on to another one. And then it was like, who's going to fill that hole?
Yeah.
And he's both responsible for like that mentality of like, I need to get that book that guy's doing, and also inevitably led to the creator-owned movement because of how Jack was inevitably screwed out of ownership of his work.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of funny, like ironically, that he was responsible for two ends of the same coin.
Well, I know a lot of people that really, really hate or have made some good criticisms of the Marvel method that Stan Lee developed. But I have, and I used to kind of think that was bad too, but now I've kind of come around, and I do think that there's some worthwhile stuff going on there, if done correctly. I think my main problem with it is that, God bless you, Stan, but sometimes I think you were saying that you wrote stuff that you didn't necessarily write, or that somebody else was doing all the hard work on. And as he put it to one of his artists, who complained because like Steve Ditko was the guy writing all that Spider-Man stuff for the first like 22 issues, and that's why he got mad and left. Is he was like, people think you're writing this, but you're not, Stan. And Stan said, well, you don't write the credit boxes. I might be mangling some of that story, but that's like a well-known story of, you know, him and Ditko coming head to head about some things. But, you know, Kirby have you guys ever seen Kirby's original pencils on any of that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely.
So have you seen how he wrote the dialogue in the margins?
It's funny. I never really thought about that, but yeah, there are scribblings in there.
Yeah, if you read it, he was writing all that stuff. Like I mean, you know, and I'm not saying that Stan didn't write stuff. I think it just got very disproportionate, and you know, Stan was always looking out for Stan. But you know, on the other hand, the artist is the director, really. And ultimately doing what's right for the story, I think, is better placed in the artist's hands. And I think it's important for a writer to figure that out and to accept that and be cool with it. Because they're, you know, you don't want to have a power struggle with an artist because they're your best asset on the book, I would assume.
Yeah, and I've tried to explain that to writers I've worked with, which I said this before. I've been really lucky with the writers that I've worked with. I really respect all of them, and I've worked really well with all of them. And I've tried to explain a couple times as sort of nicely as I can that, like, you were the right. Like, if this was a movie, you are the writer, I am the director. Not that I have like final say, but I'm in charge of everything visually that happens with the book and the story that the readers are going to see and read. That's coming from me. You know, you crafted the story, but I'm telling the story.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I'm the actors. I'm the costume designer. I'm this. You know.
Yeah.
I'm the director. I'm in charge of cinematography.
Yeah. It's like being a race car driver. They might have built the car, but you're driving it, and they need to let you make decisions. That's you're in 0 hour there.
Yeah, which, like I said, I've been lucky, and I've never had a problem with a writer going, no, you will adhere to everything that I'm doing, and I try to do that when I get a script. I try and make it,
of course,
I try and make it as close to the script as I can. But there's some things that I'll reach out to the writer like, hey, this right here just really isn't going to work, and sometimes it's just for the comics format. I'm like, I have to break this page into way more panels than you have laid out, or less panels, whatever the problem is. I'll have a solution, and it's always nice when they don't fight you on that stuff, because you're coming to me because I'm the person that does this stuff.
Right. Yeah.
It's like my graphic design years. I would get hired to do the only job I ever got fired off of. I won't say who it was for, but I got hired to do this logo. And I like to think I do fairly sophisticated logos. They're very concept based, not at all. I'm not at all, when I do logos, not at all concerned about how they look. It's only if the concept works. And the only job I ever got fired off of was when I tried to make a sophisticated logo for someone who I learned during the job really didn't want a sophisticated logo. They wanted a logo that looked more like a sports mascot than a symbol. And we just didn't agree. And I got a call one day, the guy, and he's a nice guy. I like him, but
yeah,
he was like, yeah, it's just not going to work, but we're just on different pages. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And they paid me what they owed me, and we parted ways. And I went back later, like a year later, because I was just curious to see what the logo looked like. And I was like, yep, that's what I was kind of thinking he was looking for. And there's just no way I would have designed the logo that they went with. Not that mine was better or theirs was worse. It's just it was a taste thing. I was just the wrong guy for the job, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
And
sometimes things just work out. That's just the way it goes.
Yeah, and it's also hard sometimes to, from their end as the clientele, to articulate what they actually want, because you're the one with the knowledge, but they're the ones who are commissioning the work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be so tricky to articulate.
It's important to keep that in mind for sure. It's a good point.
Now your flash drawings.
I don't like it when people that just pay like a little bit for a commission are really picky though. That's just a gripe of mine.
Have you had problems with that?
A couple times, not often, but a couple times. A convention I did, I guess a couple years ago, year and a half ago, I ran into this one guy who bought a commission off me just like on the spot that I drew, like in a half hour or whatever. And he came back and he was kind of just like, yeah, I mean, it's fine. And he still bought it, but I was like, dude, I told you that I've got a list here. I'm going to bang it out really quickly. I'm not charging that much. And you're going to complain? I don't know. That's just a gripe. But because if I ever get anything from an artist, honestly, and maybe it's probably because I am an artist, I want them to do really whatever they want to do. And maybe somebody who isn't an artist is like, no, I kind of had something in mind, and this is not at all that. But
you made it sound like you had some drawings you'd already started or completed, and he saw one and was like, "Can I buy that?" Or is that not what happened? He asked. He would do a drawing of.
Yeah, he was at my table and he was like, "Oh, this stuff's really good." And I was like, "Oh, thanks." And then he saw my commission prices for like a drawing to be done at the con. And he was like, "Can I get just like a single character?" I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And I don't even remember who I drew for him. It might have been a Venom piece. I don't remember. But he came back and he was kind of like, "It's fine." Like, "Oh, all right.
Huh.
Okay, I already have your money, so." Everybody else at that convention was phenomenal, but this one guy was like, "Oh wow, Mr. Picky here."
Yeah, it's bound to happen, I would assume. I mean,
And I don't do a lot of commissions really, so I don't run into that problem often because of that. But that's one standout experience.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see the future of conventions at this point. They seem suddenly completely off the radar. I don't know how exactly that ever changes. Which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah, hopefully that's something that after COVID and all this is over, it just bounces back.
I hope so. Yeah.
I sure hope so.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I just kind of got started doing them as an artist, and then now I just can't do it. I'm like, oh, it was so much fun, and I made some money, and I don't want to stop doing that.
I know.
Yeah, I was intending for this year to be one of my first table conventions, and that fell through. That didn't work out.
That's unfortunate. Yeah. Be fun to do a convention with you guys. It'd be nice if we're all in the same place someday.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That would be so cool.
Assuming we have conventions again.
Yes.
We'll put on a
But yeah.
Assuming there's a future where people spend time together.
Yeah, definitely.
Ink, drink, think con.
For all 10 subscribers.
BYOB.
Hey, you never know. That'd be great, actually.
Yeah, some friends of mine from high school, they put on a con. It's actually, that's the one that I went to where I had the problems with the guy.
Okay.
But yeah, it's like a real convention. People like come from, all over the country, and yeah, it's a good time. And I just like ran cross country with these guys, when I was in high school. They're just big geeks, and they make YouTube videos and got a lot of success from those. And so they are like, we're gonna do a convention in our hometown, and it's a lot of fun.
That's cool.
Awesome. Yeah, super cool.
Yeah, it's weird. People get starstruck when they see them. Not that that's weird. Like I said, they're super successful. But they came around to the table while I was there, and I was talking to one of the guys' name's Mark. I was like, "All right, see you later, Mark." And the guy was like, "Oh, Mark's like a really nice guy. When did you meet him?" I was like, "I don't know, like 6th grade or something." Like, oh, what?
Wait, what are they famous for?
They do like funny YouTube videos, and they're really into
wow.
Yeah, they're really into anime and superheroes and all that. And so they decided to put on like an anime/Comic Con, and it's it's a good time. They do like a Super Smash Bros. Tournament as part of the weekend, and I think there's like a wrestling tournament also now, and people come in costume and have like wrestling characters created with backstories, and they wrestle, and it's kind of wild.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah, my nephew shows me stuff on YouTube and TikTok or whatever, and I'm like, there's a whole world out there that I'm still figuring out.
Yeah, I'm very much out of that circle.
Yeah. Internet famous, as they say.
Here, I'll zoom in. Nate, that's coming out pretty fantastic for Flash drawing so far.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm doing the really boring part right now, just like trying to make a buffer here between my panel borders, and I decided to make all of the panels black, and I'm just gonna go in with whiteout and do all the lightning effects and everything, just to make it a little bit more dynamic, add a little more contrast to it, rather than try and add a background. I'm kind of really liking just using the black shape there, since it's not an actual comic and I don't really need to tell a story here.
I think
but I also
work
like the layout for the lightning right now, so I hope I don't forget where it's at when I go back in. But I'll end up just making it up anyway, so it's fine.
Yeah.
One of those things, I didn't put any thought into it the first time, so if I don't put any thought into it again, maybe it'll come out all right.
Yeah.
I really like when I can turn a part of a drawing into like an automatic drawing, where I just kind of like zone out. I love drawing trees and bushes and stuff. Anytime I can draw like a forest scene or whatever, I love that, because I find drawing trees and plants really, really automatic.
Wow. That's a good skill to have.
Yeah, it used to be really tedious, and I was drawing at a coffee shop here in Waco one day, just drawing. I was out on their like little back patio area, and it was a really nice fall day, and the leaves were like starting to fall, but there were still some on the trees. And I remember drawing the trees just around the coffee shop, just with like a Pentel pocket brush and a sketchbook. And I didn't put any thought into it. I was just passing the time. And I remember going, holy shit, these are the best trees I've ever drawn. And so I adopted that into like all of my finished drawings that I do try to think about. So I try and just turn my brain off anytime I draw. A background like that, trees, bushes, shrubs, even just like grass. I'll try and just let my hand go And so far it's worked out. But I'm also in stuff like that not afraid to really lay down the whiteout to add a little bit more depth or variety to the brushes.
Right.
But yeah, I've said that to you guys before, that whiteout used to be sort of like something I was really scared of, but now I just use whiteout like crazy.
Oh yeah. Yeah, whiteout's your friend in theory.
My best friend.
You can also do great like highlights and stuff. For me, sometimes it was when a drawing would come together, which was when I was doing that ink wash style. It was at the very end when I got out a white gel pen and some white paint, and would just start adding little highlights here and there, and it was like everything fell together. It was interesting because I would have a moment of panic where I was like, I think I'm ruining this drawing, and I would, was like, I'm not sure if I know what I'm doing here, but adding those white highlights, it was like, oh, okay, this worked out after all. But I would have to push through and be like, okay, well, wait for the white highlights, and then let's see how it goes if you ruined this or not.
How do those gel pens work? I've never used those.
They're great, but they're also really finicky.
Okay.
I bought them in bulk because they like everything bad about a ballpoint pen. They're like times 10. Like they'll just stop working for no reason. And I had to kind of practice with different things because some stuff just doesn't show up. And the right white paint is worth figuring out. But I don't know. For me, digitally is much better, and making sure that your ink you're using is waterproof, because otherwise you can just smoosh stuff all over the place. So for me, figuring out my way around Copics, I understood exactly how they operated and worked and what made them dry or wet, shall we say. Because with Copics, like say, you can lay down a layer and let it dry, and weeks later you can go in with colorless blender and open it up again and work it. It's kind of
really?
I had no idea about that.
Yeah, I beat my head against the wall, as they say, with cheap markers when I was first starting out, and I kept getting told I needed to use Copics, and I was like, why? I don't like it can't be any difference. Well, when I finally started doing my homework and looking into it, I realized there's a reason why everybody uses Copics, and that's one of them, is that they're super malleable. They come with refills. They seem more expensive, but I really do feel like on a certain level it's worth it because of all the amazing things you can do with them.
I have a set,
but
I've never really played with them that much.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, just a couple times for sketches. I've never done like a finished drawing that I was happy with them, because I always feel like, because I mostly use a brush, I'm like, well, if I want any of that stuff, I'll just use a wash. And I still kind of feel that way, but I do every once in a while, just on like a shit piece of paper, I'll kind of break them out and just do even just a full drawing, or a full drawing with the different gray tones, and just see what happens. And I like them because they are it's super consistent compared to sometimes, with a wash, you get a little like, oh, well, that last go around was a little darker, and now I'm not really doing anything. So you gotta sort of like troubleshoot a lot of the times when you're doing washes.
Like one thing you can do with Copics is you can lay them down and make it really flat, so you can't see the brush lines or marker lines.
Right.
But you have to know how to do it. You have to use it's good to use colorless marker or a colorless blender, but also you have to do it in a circular motion. I actually
right.
I had a representative of Copics actually sit me down and show me how. I was like, so how do I do this because I was at that point, I knew what I wanted out of. I spent a lot of time going, if only my markers would do this, if only my digital application would do this, so that I know what I want when I'm looking for something. And I think that's the best situation. So when I realized Copic had solutions to all the things I was frustrated about with the cheat markers, that was when I realized it was worth, putting some money into. But it was also ultimately I was realizing I was on the road to going digital, because there's nothing easier to lay down a flat color than with digital.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But I also studied a lot of background animation backgrounds, specifically on Samurai Jack and all the folks that influenced them, and watching how they used big paint rollers as opposed to like noodling and drawing a bunch of lines. They just had a completely different way of making shapes, and I was like, that's what I want to do. Like, that really clicked for me. And I use sponges a lot. I would actually pour out the ink in a little bowl, and then I would put it in a sponge, and I would make like rock patterns and foliage on trees. I ruined a lot of drawings doing that too, though. But I learned.
That's something I'm trying to get better at. What you were just talking about, kind of breaking away from like just lines and getting a little more shape based. Because maybe not most, but there's so many artists that I admire that don't draw just outlines for everything, and all the rendering is not just feathering. And I really want to get to do more of that, because you do open up sort of a whole other realm of drawing methods. And it is, I do play around with that much more when I draw digitally than when I draw with ink, and maybe I'm sort of in a rut because I kind of know what works for me with ink and the brushes that work and the pens I like.
Yeah.
I do get way more experimental digitally because you can always afford to play around a little more.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, you got a great inking style that you should definitely always at least keep. Even if you went fully digital, I think you should always keep 1 foot in that.
Yeah, thank you. I do when I was telling you guys I was doing the concept stuff for the new book earlier. I do kind of when I do, like the character designs. If I go in and ink those digitally, I do try and keep a little bit of the brush work that I do traditionally, at least like the textures. I try and get a lot of like dry brush brushes for fresco, or tweak things to where they kind of give me that like imperfect line. Because that's one of the biggest things that I struggled with when I moved to doing more digital stuff was I kind of got really nervous making drawings that looked more perfect because my traditional stuff is sort of messy and the lines get kind of wobbly sometimes. It was like, I guess maybe I was nervous.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to go full digital, and I was like, maybe if I can get super clean, which is not something that I'm super interested in doing clean work. But I thought if I could always get the exact line I wanted, I would just move to doing things digitally, and I rejected that.
Interesting.
I don't know why, because I do enjoy it, but for like unless it's a movie poster, I tend to, for comics, I work traditionally. And even a lot of the movie posters, I'll lay down ink washes, at least as a map for the digital painting.
Right. I think it's good to trust your intuition, though. Even if you can't put your finger on it, if there's some inner voice saying, don't go fully digital or not yet or whatever, whether you know why you're telling yourself that or not, I feel like it's important information to, like you'll know if and when it's time. But if you've got great stuff going on in your work, you don't want to lose that.
And part of it's maybe like not making it yet. I like want my first like real successful book to look like this. So like I can't change my look yet because I really want it to look like this, because I think that I've kind of hit on what I've wanted my work to look like for years finally.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been the last like year or two. I've finally gone like, you know what? I can stop being immediately frustrated with my drawings, because that's something that I struggle with for a long time. I would finish a drawing and go, "Yep, that's not good. That's not what I wanted it to look like."
Huh. Are you talking about your superhero type stuff or your political cartooning or?
Any of it, yeah, any of it.
Wow.
Political cartooning, I don't think I really ever, until my last maybe month on that job, finally hit on what I wanted those to look like for the years that I did that job.
Wow.
My first year is rough.
Is that right?
On the political cartooning front, yeah. The jokes aren't great. There's a couple of them that are good, but visually they're atrocious.
Huh.
I wish I would have gone more experimental with those. I'm a big fan of the Herblock cartoons, and he used a lot of charcoal in his. And I wish that I would have done more stuff like that, more textural stuff. Mine was like very, mostly using a pen. I did a little bit of brush stuff, mostly using a pen and just like kind of scribbling and scratching away at the forms. I played around with ink wash on those for a long time.
Did you really?
But I was never really happy with those.
Wow.
I never nailed down what I wanted those to look like.
Are you familiar with a political cartoonist named Ann Telnaze? I think it is Telnaze, something like that.
The name sounds really familiar. I can't place a particular cartoon though.
Because I thought your stuff looked a lot like hers, and I think she's a very.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of her political cartooning, but just also her drawing. So one thing I started wondering, I was like, I wonder if Ann Telnaze is a influence here or whether it's just a coincidence, but it sounds like it's a coincidence. You'd probably relate to her stuff if you saw it. It's very, very clean.
Oh my god, yeah. No, I looked it up right now. Yeah.
It's different than, say, Herblock, for instance.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Pat Oliphant.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at one of Bill Clinton right now, and that's yeah, that's some of the shapes and proportions are similar to what I did. These are vastly better.
Yeah.
It took me a long time because I wanted the shapes to be so sort of like exaggerated and cartoony. It took a long time for me to figure out what my cartoony visual identity is. I kind of know what I want superheroes to look like, or if I do a Western, I know what I want those characters to look like. But if it's a cartoony world, it took me a long time to figure out proportions and that's general techniques.
Yeah, that's so good for your creative development, though. I think is.
Oh yeah, it was phenomenal.
So I'm a firm believer that it will make your superhero drawings better and vice versa. I think all that stuff informs each other, and just makes you more well-rounded. And I would never. One thing I would never want to do is be stuck in a certain style and not ever be able to. I mean, I'm trying to think of if you have some burning desire to tell some certain type of story, but it ends up looking like superheroes, and you don't want that. Like that to me is kind of my, I don't know, nightmare situation, I guess.
Yeah, and that was a big part of my sort of development in the last probably 5 years, was realizing that, hey, you might not just want to do superhero stories for the rest of your life.
Sure.
Maybe don't focus on, honing in on that house style.
Yeah.
Because if I want to do a Western or a horror story, I would not at all want it to look like this.
Yeah, you want it to thematically look appropriate. Like you wouldn't want Jim Lee to do a children's book necessarily. It has to tonally and appropriately match what the vibe of that story is. And if you're working in one style, you're not guaranteed to have that flexibility.
Yeah. I appreciate and respect Jim Lee, but as an artist, I'm not a giant fan.
He was just the first name that came to mind, just in terms of someone with a
sorry, Jim,
scratchy style.
I'm sure you're listening to this.
He's one of our 10 subscribers.
It's one of our 10.
You've alienated 1/10 of our fan base.
Yeah. Yeah, another artist you should check out, Nate, is or both of you guys should check out, is Pat Oliphant. I might have mentioned him before, but as a political cartoonist, I think he's the guy that, from my opinion, he invented modern day political cartoons. But even not only do I think he's the wittiest guy that's ever worked in political cartoons, but nobody can draw like him. Like to me, he is as good as you get as an artist, and then some. Like and one of the things I really admire about him is that there's all kinds of things, but like he can change his style so many different ways, even though it all looks like it's drawn by him. But he can be super hyper cartoony and really funny, but then going really dark. And he's able to say more with more eloquence, I think, than any other political cartoonist that I'm aware of. I learned a lot about politics simply by reading his stuff, because I was like, wait, what does that mean? What is that? I don't understand. But it was fascinating to me. And he's brutal. I think he retired, but I think I don't know. I think he got frustrated with some of the political correctness that was kind of going on with some of the reactions to his work, which kind of surprised me. But yeah, I actually met him at Comic-Con once. He was just sitting at a table, and nobody had any idea who he was. And I never would have thought I would see him at a Comic-Con. But I was like, and he's Australian, and I was like, oh my God. And one thing he was famous for was he would, like, the presidents all kind of hated him because he was savage with that pencil. And one of the things he made fun of was President Ford always falling down. Apparently President Ford tripped and fell a lot, so Oliphant always drew him with a giant Band-Aid on his head. And apparently Oliphant was addressing all the living presidents in like the 90s at some dinner or something, and he actually walked off the stage up to former President Ford and took out a marker and drew a Band-Aid on his head.
Oh my God.
Yeah, apparently, like,
talk about stones.
Like, yeah, apparently, yeah, he was like, yeah, I almost got killed by security. but they knew I wasn't going to do anything other than draw on him, and they all thought it was really funny. So, but I love stories like that.
I may have effed this Flash piece.
Yeah, I was just about to ask, Mike, how's it going? I see you've done a lot up there.
Yeah, I definitely ruined it. Like, it's not.
Oh no!
You think so?
I got frustrated with it at one point. Totally goofed up everything I wanted to do with it, but.
Sorry to hear that.
You live and you learn.
What do you think isn't working?
Yeah. Particularly, I shouldn't have done the speed lines. That's where I messed up. Like, I was really proud. Yeah, I was actually really proud of my base drawing. And honestly, I might even go back and I might even post this episode, lightbox this, and just try to salvage what I can.
Yeah.
But yeah, I should.
That.
Yeah, no, and I think this is a great lesson for me in terms of realizing like what visual techniques work for my art style.
Yeah.
Because I mean, my style is a little bit different than House. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily like one for one. And I attempted, and I'm proud of the fact that I attempted to do something different in the way that I was illustrating speed, which is something I've never done before. But the technique just did not mesh. So I'm a little upset about that, but it's not the end of the world. It's just a drawing.
Yeah.
Do you think you're being really hard on yourself because you're a huge Flash fan?
No,
If this was another director, do you think you'd be stoked on it, or?
No, I don't. It's funny, like, I think it's because I was actually quite proud of how it was turning out before I started doing this like feathering around the outside that I was like, oh, okay, I think I finally got it. But for me, I think that there's a level of complexity that's unneeded, particularly in this piece. Like I think I over pushed elements in the drawing that I should have just left be. Like I started feathering in all around this outside to try to like replicate whatever energy I had in the thumbnail. But looking back at what I've done here is I honestly should have just left it as the line work and just done a couple of lines here and there and not done any of this and kind of just left it be. And yeah, so I mean, you know, it's a learning experience and that's better than nothing, I guess.
Oh no, that's how you learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
As you're saying, like that, it might suck at the time, but I think it's actually those are good lessons to figure out. And it's you'll fix it.
Yeah,
you might, and
absolutely.
like Nate was kind of saying, you might just be being too hard on yourself. It's hard to say, but my screen's so tiny, I can't really see as well as I'd like. But I'll have to get a better look at it later.
Yeah, here I'll zoom in for anybody watching the replay. But
okay,
it was gotta turn my phone screen back on to get it to focus. But yeah, I think my work with the figures turned out fine, but then just experimenting with how I was portraying speed just didn't come out how I wanted it to.
yeah,
That's fine. You know, kind of like we were just touching upon. You live and you learn, and
yeah.
I'll probably try to salvage this in some way. Probably tomorrow I'll light box it and at least try to get the figures one for one and maybe the background as much as I can because I really was proud of how I started this episode and the work I had going in. But yeah, I also think it's kind of fun that I have this now on record. Like I guess an audience failing on that public stage is kind of like a testament of anybody watching this can call me out and be like, hey, remember that one time you messed up and you learned? And I can go, yeah, I remember I learned from that one. Thanks.
Yeah. do either of you guys pencil print out your pencils and then ink them digitally? You know what I'm saying?
No, I don't do that.
I have before. And sometimes I really like that approach. Generally, I don't. But sometimes I just really... And it might just be like the way the pencil's feeling that day, and I just want to go in on the iPad and figure the forms out and then ink them traditionally. Yeah. But generally, I use traditional pencils, but not always.
Because that's one way that, you know, I guess in theory you could not have to light box something, as if you print it out in blue pencil and then or ink over it, or say, and if you feel like you've wiped out, you can just print it out again.
That's what I Todd, for the Spider-Man Foes episode, that's what I blew my thumbnail up and printed that out blue line, and that's what I inked on top of for that one, because I tried to replicate the energy of the thumbnail a couple of times, and I just wasn't getting it. It just was not. It was too stiff, and so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to print this out and go from there. And I really like how that drawing came out.
Yeah, that shocker piece was fantastic.
Yeah, definitely.
Something to be said here. I'll leave my thumbnail on the screen for the rest of the episode because that I'm proud of. That one had the energy I was going for. But yeah, it's crazy to think about how with a thumbnail, when you're literally just like blindly trying to figure out the forms and the blacked areas, that half the time I feel like my thumbnail is like, in terms of layout and composition and whatnot, it's just phenomenal. And then I try to translate it again, and I get too wrapped up in what the simplicity of what happened in the thumbnail was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, Nate's on standby.
Oh, did we lose Nate?
No, he
Oh, he took off for a break.
Yeah, he has a standby sign that he's been posting.
Ah. Actually, I might do the same thing. I'll be right back.
Yeah, no worries.
Oh.
So I'll cut this in for anybody watching later, because I'm scrapping the piece I had started during the episode. I'm going to start laying out the foundations for light boxing, the piece that I had started in this episode. So if you're watching from this point, enjoy some wooling of lines. So while Nate and Todd are taking a break, I'm going to start penciling in the rules for a new Flash piece, because I messed up this first one. If you guys want, while I'm starting to work on the panel borders here, I could get into my Flash pitch for you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by pitch? Like, are you actually pitching something, or like, is it just an idea, or?
No, this is me being a nerd and having headcanon and having fan fiction in my head that I wish I could articulate. But
I understand.
Yeah, if I ever got the chance to, it would be really cool to bring it to reality. Odds are it never will, but this kind of stems from things I've spoken to you guys about with the character of the Flash and my frustrations in saying that he, at his root, should be a science fiction character. He should be a science fiction hero.
Yeah, absolutely.
And especially stemming from the atomic age. My personal take on the Flash is a story rooted in hard sci-fi and deals less in traditional superheroics and crime fighting. So this concept, this pitch I have for the Flash, is that it opens in 1956, which is the year Barry Allen, the Flash, debuted. And Barry Allen is not a forensic scientist, because why would somebody who moves at light speed keep a day job where he has to wait for chemicals to process, right? It just doesn't make sense from his personality. So in my pitch on the character, he works two jobs. One, he is the theoretical physics professor at Central City University. And he also night times at Star Labs, where they're working on time travel engines. But much like any science fiction or mad scientist who operates in, a non-future setting, they're limited by the technology of their time. And so there's no means for them to power this engine that they're creating without nuclear energy. And so it's just feasibly impossible at the scale that they're trying to achieve. But anyway, Barry Allen works at the university, and he also works at Star Labs. And on his lunch breaks, or I should say during his breaks at Star Labs, he doesn't sit with the other scientists and the other researchers. He tends to sit with the janitors, because in truth, he's kind of just a simple dude, simple guy. He's not really, he enjoys intellectual conversation, but he's more of just like a guy who wants to hang out and talk
shit.
He's
a common man type.
Yeah, exactly. You're everyman. And so he hangs out with the janitors. One of the janitors' name is Leonard Snart. Another one is Mick. and you get some other rogues references in this janitor staff. But that's who Barry tends to hang out with at work. And these are guys who are not of the same intellectual prowess as Barry, but he hangs out with them because, they're people. They're not sitting there at their lunch arguing over what is at the center of a black hole. They're just talking about the hockey game.
Yeah.
Anywho, Barry Allen's there late one night, and he's trying to develop and continue his research, and he's working. And the janitors, as we find out, are actually planning a heist. So the janitors all perform a bank robbery, and they break into Star Labs, which is their place of employment, thinking that they can get away from the police who they're running from. But Barry's in his office working late. The police come in, violence ensues, gunshots go off, stray bullets flying everywhere, and their time travel device goes haywire and sends Barry Allen hurtling through space and time.
Yeah.
He lands in the future. He's arrested by these future police officers. Think Samurai Jack to some extent.
Like far future, in other words?
Very far future, several thousand years into the future.
Got it.
They have technology he has never seen, just completely technologically advanced. And he befriends a scientist named Eobard Thawne, and together they work towards developing time travel in the future because Star Labs was shut down shortly after the Barry Allen incident.
Oh.
But traveling through space and time has also left Barry with newfound powers. He's a speedster now. And using that speed, he and Thawne come up with an equation that they called the Speed Force equation, which they use to develop their new time travel technology.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a subplot in the future where there are interdimensional beings who are invading Earth. And so, very similar to the old Silver Age Flash comics where he would fight random aliens and interdimensional creatures, Flash saves the future from these invaders, and then, with the help of Thawne, gets back to his present time.
Oh, so it's kind of like a self-contained story, like a miniseries,
well,
so to speak, or a graphic novel?
That would be essentially the events of the first issue or first volume. It would be a several volume arc, but then to make it more brief, not to dwell on it too long or to give away too much of the detailings of it, you find out that the janitors who he was friends with and who performed this bank heist were also sent into various points in time. And also, and through that, stole various pieces of technology, such as like a freeze ray gun, a heat ray, and all of the classic rogues' abilities, Mirror Master's pistol. And so all of the rogues are actually these former janitors who he befriended, who were also sent through time and space. Mm-hmm. But then in the future, Eobard Thawne, who was the scientist who helped Barry fight off the interdimensional invaders and help them develop time travel and get back to the past, is forgotten. So when we meet that character in the future, he's a younger man like Barry. But in his time, he grows old. And he's forgotten. Because everybody remembers that Barry Allen, this man from the past, saves the future. And so in his jealousy and his rage, he ends up going out of his way to give himself the same abilities, using their Speed Force equation that they developed. And so he becomes the Reverse Flash from the future.
Yeah.
And there's a subplot that would be going through the entirety of the first volume, in which you're cutting back to Barry's wife, Iris, and her struggling with the fact that her husband apparently dies in some mysterious science accident at Star Labs, this huge explosion that occurs, and at the same time also tragically loses family members in a car accident and has to adopt, essentially, or take on the responsibilities of raising her delinquent teenage nephew Wally.
Oh, okay.
And in the original Flash mythos, Wally West was the president of his town's Flash fan club.
Right.
And so in this universe, this kid who's a delinquent finds meaning not in being a Flash fan, but he starts trying to investigate what happened to his uncle.
Hmm.
And then from that point onward, you get into things of Barry coming back, and there's been a time jump. So now it's been maybe like 5 years, even though he's only been gone for 3 months in his mind.
Mm-hmm.
And Iris is raising her nephew. They're now estranged because he can't bridge that relationship with her. And all these janitors who he used to befriend, who are now criminals who travel throughout time and space committing crimes, and then coming back to different eras to spend their wealth and live in luxury. He's having to deal with them, and the return of Thawne, who's now a jealous former friend. And then Wally eventually gets wrapped up in the time travel shenanigans. But that's my general pitch for The Flash, because my issue with the character is different than the Superman dilemma, in which Superman is essentially a god who is dealing with mortal men and getting into our affairs, technically.
Mm-hmm.
The Flash, I should say, Superman's morals are what compel him to help humanity.
Yeah.
Whereas the Flash, I don't think should serve that same purpose. I think the Flash should be a character who's filling a niche of the Justice League that isn't really touched upon when you think about all of their main tier characters. Green Lantern is kind of a science fiction character, but he's also magical. The Ring isn't science fiction. He just happens to be set in space with aliens.
He's a cop.
Yeah, he's a cop. Batman's the vigilante. Wonder Woman is a mythical figure. Superman is an alien, sure, but I would describe him as science fiction first and foremost.
Yeah.
And so I think with The Flash, there's a missed opportunity to really tell a compelling nuclear age science fiction tale with time travel involved.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
But then, as I kind of hinted at to you guys, I think there's also a story to be told, similar to the Chip Zdarsky Spider-Man life story that came out last year, which is essentially the pitch of what if Spider-Man took place what if Spider-Man aged in real time? So Peter Parker is a teenager in 1963 or 66 or whatever, and then each subsequent issue leaps a decade. So in the 60s issue, he's dealing with Vietnam, and he's a teenager. And then the next issue, it's the 70s, and he's in his 20s. And then it's the 80s, and he's in his 30s, and so on and so forth until they got to present day, and he's in his 60s.
Wait, which character are you talking about?
That's Spider-Man Life Story by Chip Zdarsky. And
wow.
I think there should be an equivalent or a similar take on the DC universe, in which this Flash story could potentially take place, where it all begins in 38 with the debut of Superman, and then you get into the Silver Age, and you can still keep Batman and Superman around, because if Batman is 20 in 1939 when Batman debuted, Batman would be about a 40-year-old man by the time that Hal Jordan and Barry Allen get to the scene.
Yeah.
And if they're aging in real time, Superman can stay immortal, and Wonder Woman can also be ageless. But you could do things where Dick Grayson becomes Robin, and Dick Grayson is the one who has to deal with the death of Jason Todd in the 80s when he is the Batman.
So you mean Dick Grayson becomes Batman?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Because I think that's something that's starting to be more apparent with mainstream comics, is that issue that all these characters have been around for nearly 100 years. And Marvel in particular hasn't had a hard reboot that ignores or resets like that time era issue. They just always act as if it's been about 10 years since every character has come on the scene.
Yeah, it seems like DC has addressed that multiple times, whereas Marvel just, I don't know if they've ever addressed it.
Which is bizarre, but I think at some point you'll have to, right? Because soon I think we're going to
they
get to
haven't
like
this long. I mean, and I'm not saying they shouldn't, but like, actually, it's something I was going to mention earlier. Is that did you guys know that before? So Alan Moore had a falling out with Marvel. I think over the Miracle Man, like the Miracle Man's original name was Marvel Man, and Marvel gave him a hard time. So he was like, "Well, I'll just never work for Marvel ever." Because I didn't like how they acted towards me. But something I didn't realize is that he actually pitched some ideas to Marvel before that, including he and Dave Gibbons were going to do Fantastic Four. And he said, one of the things he said is that he actually had a proposal he wanted to do at Marvel to explain why everyone is basically perpetually 29. He was like, I want to address that issue and have an actual explanation for it in the Marvel universe. But I've never heard any more about it. But I always was curious, dying to know like what that explanation would have been, some sort of time loop or whatever, where time goes on, but people's ages never do. I mean, is Aunt May still alive, or should they finally kill her off?
she's still around,
But yeah,
as far as I'm
is
concerned.
she really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, but it's interesting that I thought that was where you were going with that, Michael. I was like, oh, this sounds like it's also an explanation for why time is so fluid in the DC universe. That's a good way to look at it.
That's a good point. I hadn't even considered that, but you could use the Flash as a means of explaining that, and they kind of have with Flashpoint.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I thought that was what you were saying, actually. That's not where the idea first started?
No, not at all. My
That's
issue really stemmed with my frustrations in being a Flash fan and reading the comics and reading the mainstream books, not even just the older books, was that they treated him in a way that made him feel like a typical superhero, when in reality he should be something entirely different. He should be treated entirely different in terms of how he's approached in his storytelling and what issues he deals with as a character. But I don't know if we'll ever see that.
I feel like Grant Morrison tried to kind of do that with his stories. I thought when he took on, he and Mark Millar took on the Flash a long time ago, that those stories got pretty crazy.
Well, believe it or not, Grant Morrison, post his series Multiversity, had announced a sequel to it that was called Multiversity 2: The Flash.
Oh, wow.
And that, I think, would have been the most exciting thing to happen to the character since sliced bread, because Grant Morrison, of course, is such an intellectual writer. His stuff is very heady, that if he really felt the same way about the character and took him in that science fiction route, I think it could have taken the character in that direction that I think it really needs to go in. But
wait, so you're saying this is something he proposed and then it never panned out?
It was announced, actually, but it never came out.
Oh. So what happened? Do you have any idea?
No idea. I remember it was announced, and then nothing ever came of it.
I mean, I'm sure there's tons of those. I love hearing about stuff like that, although it's a bummer when it doesn't happen.
Yeah, but, Francis Manapul, actually, who we were talking about in regards to Flash artists, he had announced that he was doing an Aquaman Earth 1 years ago.
Wow.
And that never panned out either.
Wow. I have pages that have been passed around that I photocopied, like not from so I have like photocopies of photocopies of photocopies of a Superman annual that Chris Claremont and Michael Golden started and never finished.
Ooh.
But yeah, Chris Claremont doing a Superman annual breaks my heart. I would have killed to see that.
What happened? Do you know?
I don't know. I mean, hopefully Michael Golden's not hearing this because I'm a gigantic fan. But I also think he's kind of notorious for not necessarily finishing work. So I think he just didn't get around to finishing it, and they took it off the schedule, and it just never ended up happening.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah, isn't it? I've been meaning to go through my backlog of old photocopies and stuff. I've got some pretty cool stuff in there. But those Michael Golden, I'd have to Google that. I wonder if that's like public knowledge anymore, or like if there's more pages floating around out there. But Golden's a perfectionist, so like everything he does is so balls out that I think drawing a cover is one thing, but doing an entire comic is probably it's just such a ton of work for him. Yeah, that's really interesting. Did you guys know that Grant Morrison wrote Arkham Asylum. I don't know what else he did. I think he did a few things here and there, but apparently Alan Moore sat him down afterwards and said, I read Arkham Asylum and I disagreed with a bunch of it, but let me tell you why. I think there's some things to learn from it. And I guess he was the one that said you need to focus on your plots and how to put a story together, beginning, middle, and end. And that's where I think you'll be really good at. And I feel like Grant Morrison became this terrific plotter afterwards based on that advice. Because I kind of blew Grant Morrison off a long time ago at first, and then when I started hearing little things that like Animal Man and a few other things were really good, and I was like, really? And then I read his stuff, and man, great plotter.
That would be interesting if that's true, because those two notoriously have a feud.
Grant Morrison and Alan Moore?
Yeah.
Really? Over what?
Well,
clearly a woman. I'm just kidding.
Well, apparently,
lack of it.
From what I understand, and this is third hand or fifth hand,
yeah,
it all stems from Alan Moore claiming that Grant Morrison was just ripping him off stylistically.
Huh.
And of course, then Grant Morrison retorted with something in the line of like, "You're not as intellectual as I am. Like your stories aren't as creative or fluid." Wow. And yeah, they've apparently had a feud for years where they've just like disrespected each other and like claimed the other one was riffing off of them, and yeah, apparently they don't get along from what I've heard. But
yeah,
they're also both practitioners of magic.
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of great memes of them. I know I'd sent one in the chat a while ago of Alan Moore as Dumbledore and Grant Morrison as Voldemort from Harry Potter. And just visually, it worked too well. It's too close.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
Wow. So Grant Morrison's into that magic stuff too? I didn't know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yeah, I don't know that I knew that either.
Yeah. Oh, well, Grant Morrison, speaking of magic and things he believes, he claims that, I don't know if you've ever seen this, he claims that the spirit of John Lennon came to him and gave him a song that he wrote post-mortem.
Oh, wow.
And he's performed it live. Grant Morrison has performed it solo. But, yeah, that man's wacky. That man...
He also does like a lot of psychedelic drugs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
I take everything he says with a huge grain of salt.
Yeah, that man has some beliefs.
Never know. Possible. But that's interesting. I didn't. I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated by hearing Alan Moore's ideas about magic, because Alan Moore explains himself really well. And when he's had a feud with people, I don't necessarily. There is times when it's kind of like, dude, you got to lighten up. But I also see his point. I think he has feuds with a lot of people, but I think he's also just happy to not be world famous and not go do conventions and just kind of having as normal of a life as he possibly can. But I think he's also very consistent, morally, and when he has creative ideas, he's thought them through really well.
Yeah, as much as people who I would say are more traditional compared to Alan Moore in terms of belief systems and lifestyles and whatnot. Sure. It does sound wacky at first, but yeah, he and Grant Morrison are both extremely intelligent creators. And I think like with anybody, it's worth listening to whatever ideas or philosophies they might uphold. As absurd as it may sound, because I think there could be some wisdom at the root of it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm kind of surprised that Alan Moore would accuse anybody of ripping him off. Because I do think that I think Vertigo is essentially, you're doing, I know it's gone now, but like you were doing Alan Moore. Like that was built on being kind of an Alan Moore type of writer. And I don't think that's a bad thing. On the other hand, I'm one of those people that personally doesn't think that DC should have done those Watchmen books. I just, you know, whether I agree with it or not, I can see Alan Moore's point of being upset with somebody that decided to do a Watchmen book, because he's didn't want anybody to do that. But
yeah, and they were supposed to get ownership of that stuff back, and of course they didn't.
And then they screwed him. Yeah. And that's unfortunate. But because of that experience, he sat down Garth Ennis when he first met him and said, "Learn from my mistakes. You need to own your own work." And if you look at Garth Ennis, he owns everything he does, I would assume, including Preacher, even though he did it at its original. And Garth Ennis, The Boys, like they own all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's certainly one of those things that people have learned from. I don't know. I find Alan Moore endlessly fascinating. He's really interesting.
Oh yeah.
Guy. Yeah.
Are you guys familiar with the YouTube channel Wisecrack?
No.
Yes.
They have a great video about Alan Moore's magical philosophies and how he's incorporated them into his work. It's really fascinating. It kind of like breaks down some of his beliefs in more palatable ways.
Yeah.
But so also isn't like
serious.
What's that?
It's like a serious look at it, or are they making fun of it, so to speak?
Oh no! So the YouTube channel is very philosophy based. It's very like intellectually minded, and so when they approach the video, it's not out of like a mockery or trying to poke fun at him or anything he adheres to, but it's more like they might make a joke here and there about him being a wizard, but it's more so like trying to understand what he's getting at with what he says and practices.
Yeah. I think you can do both. I think it's okay to. I think if Alan Moore himself doesn't recognize that there's something kind of funny about it, then he needs to chill out.
Yeah.
But I'm willing to bet even he realizes that it's actually funny on a certain level.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. I'll have to check. What's it called again?
It's called Wisecrack. I can send it to you guys after the video. Yeah. After we're done recording this.
Yeah. That's cool.
Here, I'll zoom in. Todd, I don't think we've gotten a closer look at your piece yet in the video.
Oh, okay.
Just want to show what you're doing.
So there's the Flash, and I'm coming to that point where I think I need to quit and not quit, but stop rendering him and start getting into the speed lines, because I think I'm getting into avoiding it territory. But I have so many layers going that I'm probably gonna make just a general copy of all this, and then maybe do that and like replicate it and do it on a separate layer. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. I sure like drawing the Flash, man. This was a good idea. I'm glad we did it.
Yeah, that's turning out fantastic. I think
man.
yours really has like that classic feel to it.
Yeah, like for me, I actually couldn't. I don't necessarily know. I knew of the Flash, but I don't really know where I discovered him at. But for me, I'm a huge Alex Toth fan, and Alex Toth did one Flash story with the Atom and the Flash teaming up and going to some subatomic world, and it's still some of my favorite Alex Toth art ever. So whenever I draw the Flash, or if I draw the Flash, it's hard for me to get that Flash out of my mind. And so his jawline and his mouth, for me, is kind of, Toth had a certain way of drawing noses. You could probably switch this out for Space Ghost if you really wanted to. But I don't know. Toth had this way of drawing people where they were really handsome and toothy looking, and I always kind of like that. I like that toothiness that he would bring to his characters.
Yeah, the classic like square jawed gentleman look.
Yeah, but he would do it in a weird way where, like, I've tried to emulate it, and they look buck toothed. So I'm always like, how does he do that? How does he pull that off? I think it was Errol Flynn he was drawing. I think he was a gigantic Errol Flynn fan, and I think whatever was going on with that jawline and those teeth was an Errol Flynn trait, shall we say. He would draw Errol Flynn type characters in his stories a lot.
Yeah, Bravo for Adventure. Is that?
Yeah.
That character is very distinctly Errol Flynn.
Bravo for Adventure. Yeah, that's one of my favorite comics of all time.
Here, Nate, I'll switch over. Are you working on the lightning effects right now?
I am. I think I'm just about done with those. I'm just trying to really nail them down right now. Get the way it's interacting with the objects. I'm pretty happy with how this stopwatch is exploding.
Nice.
I went a little simpler than I did over here, but I wanted most of it going this way, since that's the direction he's moving.
I think that was the right move.
Yeah, I said, like, I drew them all out in blue line pencil, and then I was just gonna make them up again when I did the inks, or the whites, I guess I should say. And I don't know if I should keep adding more, or if I should just absolutely be done adding lightning. It's one of those things. I normally am pretty good at knowing when something's done, because I like to plan my drawings out. But sometimes with things like this, like effects things, I'll kind of leave it up to the moment. Right now I'm really struggling knowing. I don't know if I haven't done enough or if I've done too much. I do need to fix this leg right here. That line's not quite smooth enough.
I like the way that you illustrated the lightning. It's not as choppy as some other people do it. It's very fluid. It's very natural.
I like the lightning in sort of like older movies, like how you see it in like special effects in like 80s movies.
Oh yeah.
And it is kind of like more like flowy. It's not jagged.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I always try to emulate when I do sort of lightning things, is kind of round it off a little bit. I think it's okay to round it off some.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I think it really gets the speed across really well, especially the way you have it like flowing off of his head.
Yeah, it's sort of tricky knowing where to have the lightning sort of coming off of him. My approach was sort of all over, but then there's some places where it does feel a little weird that it might be coming off of. It's weird to do sort of like random things because as you're drawing it, it is intentional, obviously, but it is sort of something that you're like, this would just be, if this was just if this was real and it was a snapshot, it wouldn't be planned out. And so it's hard to sort of get that kind of random effect in something that you are sort of meticulously drawing and planning out while you're going. That's one of the harder things to do, I think, is draw the less intentional things.
What do you mean less intentional? Like,
yeah, like something like I was talking about earlier with trees, how I feel like I can draw them fairly automatically. Something like this.
Oh,
yeah. I wish and maybe I'll get to the point one day where an effect like this would be automatic. That's what I feel like it should be. But right now I am being pretty intentional with it. Kind of like when we did the Spider-Man stuff. Webbing is something that I would like to be way more automatic, but to me at least, it's really easy to make webbing not look like webs.
Yeah.
So I pulled up for that piece, a lot of like just references for spider webs. What do they look like? And this one I looked at some different lightning photos to see, like, because it's really easy to kind of get it wrong.
Yeah.
And you don't really think about that kind of just jumping into it. You're like, oh, I know what lightning looks like, or I know what webs look like. And you get into it, and you're like, oh, maybe I don't know at all what that stuff looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, like lightning. Oh, sorry, you go, Todd.
Well, I was just going to say real quick, there's a lot of drawings where I'm like, oh, this will be easy and go really quick. And then I'm like, oh, man, I don't know what I'm doing, do I? But other times, really complicated drawings or drawings that I think are going to be complicated will actually turn out better than I expected and maybe even be easier. And it might be because I thought them through more properly.
Right.
It's hard to say exactly, but.
I was going to say.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do find the more planning, the better, obviously. Anyway.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, I think it's hard to get, not that spontaneity is bad or inherently, and the antithesis of like good art, but I agree. Like, I think there's a middle ground to be struck with a level of planning and structure to something, and the free flowing that comes from illustrating.
Yeah. Well, you have to. It'll be stiff if you think about it too hard.
Yeah, that's sort of the nightmare is planning something out, and in the end it just doesn't, it looks lifeless.
Right, exactly.
Because you can definitely just draw something to death.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Unfortunately, because you just put so much work into it, and then you take a step back and you look at it and you're like, well, that was fun to draw. Too bad I absolutely ruined it.
I know that feeling.
Yeah.
Well, that's like, I'll show the audience right now. Like, so this is the second time I've attempted this drawing. And the first time, kind of to Nate's point, I over-rendered and it came out flat, and I kind of lost the energy that the thumbnail had in this version of the drawing. And then I had gone back and done this version of the drawing, which I'm also not quite happy with. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do. Maybe I'll redraw it, or I'll just leave it for the episode and take the L, but learn the lesson from it.
I bet you can fix it.
Yeah, I'm going to have to definitely practice with that, though, because I think, speed is something that's pretty necessary in illustrating comic books, particularly action or superhero ones.
Right.
So it's something I'm going to have to figure out how to do in my art style at some point, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to do. Speed. Like I said, I really don't like drawing speed lines. And so I try to, like I wanted to do with this drawing, hopefully I was successful, try and show that sort of speed where like these three sort of different things are happening all just, in an instant because it's the Flash. That way I don't have to do speed lines. I really don't draw many like motion lines on like a punch or something. Sometimes I do. Actually, I'm thinking of a couple panels from Ray Gun Cowboy where I did that. Someone will draw a gun really quickly, but I don't typically go for that kind of approach.
Mm-hmm.
I like to find it maybe more in the environment, especially with the Flash. It's really easy to, like I did with the lightning, sort of, because he does have such an immediate impact maybe on his environment that you can show sort of like the magnitude of his motion through the surroundings rather than this is these lines show that it's really fast. That said, I did experiment for a long time drawing the Flash when I was in college, where like if it was this drawing, I just wouldn't draw at all the back side of the figure, and I would have it sort of blend into this one shape, and I would just draw the front of every shape of the form, just the front line. And that I had some success with that, but it's not feasible for every panel. Certainly not every angle. You kind of do have to do a side angle or a side view of the figure to make that work.
Yeah. I guess it would be better to figure out your approach beforehand.
Before you film trying to figure it out.
Before you jump into ruining a piece that you were pretty proud of, yeah.
For this, it's fine. But if DC called you and was like, "Hey, we want you to be the new monthly Flash artist," then you'd have to repeat it over and over. And
that would actually be like a really scary thing. Exactly for that reason. I don't know how I would draw that character.
Yeah,
because the motion is so drastic and dynamic. I really don't know what my approach to a Flash book would be, because you couldn't do, I think, this for every panel, because this is sort of an approach to just the one singular illustration. Yeah, that would be a tough one. I'd love to do that book. I would never say no to that. But I would really probably lose some sleep over trying to figure out just how to draw the character using his superpowers.
Yeah, especially because like other artists have done things where it's like a streamed line behind him, or they'll do the Spider-Man approach where it's like multiple figures, but their opacity is lower. So yeah, that's a difficult question, especially. I guess it's kind of the root of what the lesson I learned today is, which is within your artistic style, certain techniques will work and others won't. And it's important to figure that stuff out, particularly like Teacher Todd. That's a great Teacher Todd moment where you said, like, better words of wisdom from Todd. Better to learn that now than when DC's knocking at the door asking you to do it. So that's a great point. Like, it's one thing when you're just making the art for yourself or for something like this, but as a professional illustrator, if you have to take an assignment where that's a necessity, you have to learn how to do it that makes sense with your visual take on a character or a story.
Yeah. I was going to say something, but now I lost my train of thought. But I was going to say, I mean, it kind of goes back to the way my mindset has changed of like, you know, if they were going to call one of you guys and say, hey, we want you to draw the Flash, I'd like to think, or I think it would be beneficial to everybody involved if it's because they saw something in your work where they're like, oh my gosh, that thing we saw, he would be so cool to do the Flash like that, as opposed to we don't know what your Flash would look like. You're kind of a strange choice, but let's throw you in the deep end. You know?
Very true.
That would end up potentially, it's everybody's dream job to get get called to do the Flash, but like it can turn into a nightmare really fast too, I bet.
Yeah, I feel like I could fail really quickly doing the Flash in particular. Possibly. If I didn't have a solid approach to it. Hopefully, I would do my homework and figure something out. And I mean, that's also communicating with your editors and your writers and everything. But
right.
Yeah, I feel like I could fail really quickly if I didn't do my homework.
Yeah, one of the things that's challenging about that character in particular is running poses, one after another, on a page with 6 panels, all feeling like they're capturing movement and form correctly, and weight in particular. That's the most difficult one. I think that's one that, Nate, your piece I think captures really well is the weight. And I don't think it's because his thighs are dummy thick in yours. But like capturing the landing on the ground and how his body is twisting to kind of push himself forward. That's so difficult to capture, and to do that page after page in a Flash book would be very difficult.
Yeah, I always struggle with what Flash's sort of like body type should be, because I think he's one of the few that should just have, zero body fat on him.
Yeah.
But I also, for this drawing in particular, I looked at a lot of like Olympic sprinters running to kind of get the form right. And so like this body is based entirely on whatever reference photo. I don't know who it is. Some dude taken off from the starting line on a track. And so I just sort of modeled it after that guy. But I mean, his legs should be like, I think, fairly muscular. But generally, I think he should just be like really shredded and kind of definitely slimmer than your Batman and your Superman.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And yeah, these guys should not all have the exact same body. That's ridiculous to me.
Yeah, that plays into the things we've talked about with illustrating a team book, and how with Wonder Woman, as we touched upon before we started filming, Darwin Cook's take on Wonder Woman, where she stands several inches above Superman, gives a dynamic nature to their relationship, visually and character-wise. And to have all of these superheroes stand all 6'3", all 220 pounds, just doesn't make sense from a character standpoint or from a visual standpoint. It doesn't influence, it doesn't inform the reader or the audience in any way if everybody looks the same way.
Yeah, they can't all be 6'2" and 220 pounds or whatever. That just doesn't make sense. In my mind, Superman is a little taller than Batman, but he's also like not toned at all. There's no like intentional muscle definition there, because he doesn't, like, that guy doesn't have to work out. He doesn't have to train. Whereas, Batman, he's probably got a 6-pack, whereas Superman's just got like, farm boy. He's got a farm boy body.
Yeah, he's eating pork all the time and corn.
Yeah.
Well, Superman can probably eat whatever he wants.
True.
Yeah, he eats ice cream for every meal.
He eats solar radiation.
That'd be the best superpower of all.
Yeah, it really would. Oh my god.
Well,
if I just eat chips for every meal and be sustained and never, and not die when I'm 40 from, just failure of every major organ. Oh my god, I'd take that.
Well, that's something that's always fun about the Flash.
Chips? Hey, I want to eat chips, dude.
Yeah, that's something that's always fun about the Flash, is when they're like, oh, well, he has a metabolism that's like 500 times stronger than a normal person's. So he's like constantly snacking. Or, that's one of those character logic things that also plays into who they are as a person.
Right.
Which I really appreciate.
And I love those little things.
Yeah. Well, you can't delve
There's a great John Byrne Superman issue from, I think, his first like six issues on the character, the Man of Steel run, where he Lois Lane comes over to his apartment and he has like a weight set in his living room, and he's like, obviously I don't use this, I have to have this for appearances because I'm jacked. People have to think I work out. I'm like, I love that because that's something that you might not really think of, but he's got this bodybuilder physique, and Lois is coming over, so he's gotta. But I also like to think that with him specifically, he's got to have a body type that you can kind of like with posture, kind of make schlubby. Because Clark really, it doesn't make sense that he would be like a gym rat,
Kind of like the Frank Quietly sketches for All-Star Superman.
Well, that's what Christopher Reeve did.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he should have. I always draw Clark with like a little bit of a double chin, just because of his posture.
Yeah,
he kind of like keeps his chin down a little bit. Whereas Flash should have 0 body fat. He should have crazy muscular legs. His arms are not huge. I tried to draw his arms, definitely toned, definitely muscular. But yeah, this guy, he's probably incapable of storing fat.
Yeah.
And that's just there's unique things you can play with the characters visually that different. In a Justice League book, I would want to see more of that. And some artists do it, but I want to see it more. I want to see somebody really, really play with it. That's why I like one of the things I do like about the Justice League movie is that Ezra Miller is so much smaller than everyone else on screen.
Oh, is he? I didn't realize that.
He's the shorty of the group. And when they all stand at the end of the movie, they're all standing next to each other. And it's like Jason Momoa, Ben Affleck, and Henry Cavill. And Ezra Miller. And you're like, yeah, he's not very big. And that's good because there's no reason for him to be.
Well, anybody would also look small standing next to those guys. Those guys
True.
are really genuinely big. I mean, Christopher Reeve in his own way would look small next to those guys in a sense. And I think he was a pretty
big.
tall guy.
Yeah, he was 6'4", 6'5". He put on a lot of weight for that movie.
It's almost the way to approach the visual direction of a team book like that is to imagine that you're pulling a cast together of various Olympic athletes from different sports.
Right.
And that's the way it should be illustrated. Like if you think of like Superman as a power lifter, Batman is a gymnast, Aquaman's the swimmer. Like you could pull those body types and put them next to each other, and those athletes are all totally different.
Flash is the Olympic sprinter or a distance runner. And Batman's, he's it's really easy. He's a martial artist. He doesn't have to be the biggest guy, but he's got a very powerful body. And Superman is Superman's J.J. Watt from the Houston Texans. He's just big. He's just a big, powerful guy. And I don't think that Superman actually has to be that big because his superpowers. But visually, it just translates how powerful he is if he's a bigger guy. And I like that Frank Quietly, Tim Sale, just big farm boy Superman. But yeah, I usually when I work on a book, and I haven't done a real superhero book yet, so I haven't had to really cast body type other than just normal human body. But I do like to cast. I'll think about like actors or people I've seen, and I will try and not necessarily do a likeness of them, but I'll try and keep their face or demeanor in mind when I draw that character. Kind of, exactly what David Mazzucchelli did with Gregory Peck and Bruce Wayne in Batman Year One, because I thought that was such a genius approach just for continuity. It's hard, I think, to draw the same face a bunch of times without reference.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's crazy hard for me to do.
Yeah.
Especially when these aren't real people.
Yeah.
That's true. They aren't.
If you had to draw Lady Gaga 20 times over, there's enough photographic reference to go, I can get her from any pose and get the nose structure and the cheek structure right. But when it's a fictional character, if you're not at least mentally conscious of the fact that they have to look somewhat similar from panel to panel in terms of facial shape, eyes, eyebrows, you're going to have a really wonky book.
Yeah, I'm always amazed when people can do that because I struggle. That's something that I really, really struggle with on the books I work on is sometimes I'll draw a panel and it's tough when you really, really like the drawing. You're like, that doesn't look like the guy. That doesn't look like the guy I'm supposed to be drawing. That's not his nose, but I really like that nose. I use a lot of self-reference. I'll take reference photos of myself for facial expressions, like a really big thing I push for because there's a lot of, especially in superhero comics, faces. The expressions just don't work. They look really stiff and lifeless. But like, what's his name? Sean Phillips. You can tell in a lot of his books, the characters look like he does. If you know what he looks like, you're like, this looks like an older Sean Phillips. Right? This looks like a younger Sean Phillips. And he's just taking his face and sort of taking the expression and putting it on whatever character that is. And I'm sure he used a lot of photo reference too. But a lot of times the main character looks a lot like Sean Phillips. And like Tommy Lee Edwards, most of the books he does, he shows up in them. He will put himself almost like exactly the way he looks. He'll show up even just like in a background or he'll show up. There's a book he did called Turf. And I think it's the first issue. The main character is like getting a haircut. He's like at his barber. It takes place in like the 20s or the 30s. And the barber it's Tommy Lee Edwards. When he did the second issue of Superman American Alien, and just one of the thugs, you look at it and you're like, oh, there's Tommy. That's him. Wow. And I think that's like a really fun sort of like Easter egg for the reader. And it might just be it's probably just fun for him, something he likes to do. But it could be like a Sean Phillips thing where it's sort of like out of necessity. The reference of his face just worked really well, and so he just ran with it. I mean, there's nothing.
Yeah,
definitely nothing wrong with that.
Reference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I felt like a total idiot recently when I had to illustrate a prison courtyard scene for Ultramax, and I like totally developed like different characters who were in this scene just for like the visual iconography. And then the next day I was hanging out with my brother and my cousin, and I was like, why didn't I just put you guys in the courtyard? Why didn't I just think to throw you guys in there? I spent so much time figuring out who these basketball players were. I could have just put people I know in there.
Yeah.
I try to do for I mean, drawing superheroes and stuff, like they're all crazy muscular and it's hard to take reference for those because I do not go to the gym. And so I was doing just this Spawn drawing just for myself, just to practice different inking techniques. This was a month or two ago, and I could not find the right reference for the pose that I wanted to draw, because I usually have a pose in mind and then I try and find the closest reference and meet somewhere in the middle of what I'm thinking and the reference. And I just couldn't find anything that I wanted. So I ended up taking a reference photo, took my shirt off, flexed absolutely as hard as I could. I think I almost died doing it. I set my camera to like take a bunch of pictures like within 10 seconds or whatever, and got close enough that I could exaggerate the forms to where I actually knew what was going on within the reference. But yeah, that one hurt. It's like I gotta just flex every muscle I have. I had, I was flexing like my core and my arms and my neck.
Wow.
Like I'm gonna pop a blood vessel. I need to work out if I'm gonna do this. Cause Jorge Jimenez.
Oh, he's jacked.
That, but that dude's jacked.
Yeah, that guy's massive.
Dude works out.
Same with Greg Capullo. Like Greg Capullo is a former bodybuilder, and his
arms.
Is he
really?
Yeah, he's posted pictures of him when he was younger and actually like competing. But the dude is still massive. Like his arms are like barrels around at the bicep.
I can't imagine you ever go back to normal once you've done stuff like that.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I know like Doug Mankey is like a power lifter.
I've seen him post that.
For him to get, sort of like if he ever takes a reference, which I'm sure he does, just like pictures. Just I need a massive dude doing this specific pose. I'll take a picture of myself because I'm a massive dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd be really good at like any reference I need for Spider-Man. Be really good. I've got a slight build.
You could probably translate yourself into the Hulk, though. I think you could do it if you want.
It's really easy because I really just need it for the gesture, and so it is actually really easy to. For something like that, it would just be for the gesture. That Spawn drawing, I wanted a little bit more light information in the reference, and so that's why I was trying to get. I like set up my some lamps to where I got sort of the directional light I wanted. And I took some photos, just me normally, and I was like, there's just not enough information there. I don't know enough maybe about anatomy to make it up. And so I was like, I got to get just a little bit more information in this reference photo to make it believable. Because Spawn specifically is one of those characters, since the Todd McFarlane days, he's gotten a lot more, I don't want to say photo real, but there's a lot more expression and I guess photo realness to those comics since like Jason Sean Alexander.
That's what I was about to bring up.
Has done those books because he is just phenomenal.
Right, but he also takes tons of reference.
Oh yeah. And I want to get better about going around town and taking just reference photos of different spots downtown just to kind of build a library of reference. Because I know going back to Tommy Lee Edwards, whenever he starts a book, I think he said that he does that. He'll kind of find visually what he's looking for somewhere and just take hundreds and hundreds of photos to choose from.
Yeah.
And that just makes things so much easier when you have sort of the things figured out, when you don't have to figure out what takes up the space, especially for backgrounds.
Yeah.
There is so much that I don't remember is in a background, if it's an alley, if it's a living room, if it's a kitchen. There's so many things that i'll forget about if I'm just making it up on the spot, and I don't want to draw a space that doesn't feel real or lived in.
Yeah, definitely.
Like this hand here on this flash drawing, I took a bunch of reference photos of just my hand holding. I tried a few without holding something, and then I tried holding something, and I couldn't make the right reference, and then I ended up just researching and Googling a few different hands and found one that really worked. And for something like this, that because it is just a hand and it is kind of like a close-up of that hand, it has to look exactly right or it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And that's something that always scares me. Like Flash's hands here are pretty small. Mm-hmm. And so while I used the reference photo for like the runner as a general idea, I did make the hands up and I think they work, but this hand has to be a good drawing on its own, and that's always really scary.
Yeah
absolutely. And hands in themselves are just weird noodly shapes.
Hands are hard.
So to get that correct holding that shape, like I've seen people illustrate like the anatomy of the hand in terms of joints, and they put a hinge in the center of the hand here because of when you like grab something like the stopwatch in your picture, these two halves crunch in together like that.
Oh, right.
So it like, because it's not just like a square that your fingers are wrapping around like that. It's not like a paw.
Right.
It's like it's enclosing in on itself.
It can do so many things, and like fingers coming out towards the camera always get weird.
Right.
You'd think that we were doing more than just inking and drinking on this podcast, the way we're talking about hands. They can just do so many things, man. Like, can you do this? Like, wow.
I've heard a bunch of artists say, like, how are hands really hard to draw? You have two of them right in front of you. And I've always tried to take that to heart. I'm like, I have two great references right here.
Yeah.
But they are inherently just so complex that they are really hard to draw.
Yeah.
And it does take, for me, for a drawing like this specifically, the exact right reference photo to get it right. There was a panel in the last Ray Gun Cowboy that the foreground of the panel is the main character's. It's just on his hand. Try to get the right angle on the camera, something like that. Just on his hand, and he's holding his pistol. And it's the biggest thing. There's another character escaping out a door, and he's pointing the pistol at her. And that was the most intimidating panel, at least on that page, because I just had to make this giant hand work.
Huh.
And there was something about getting enough black ink on that hand to form it right and still have it work within the black-white balance of the page and of that panel. And also just making it look like a hand that's holding a pistol. So I, broke my airsoft pistol out and took a bunch of photos. Thank God for that thing that I got when I was 15 or whatever. Because I use it, almost daily to take photos since I've done this Western. And just everyone has a gun in the book.
Yeah.
Everyone has a gun. And
actually drawing people holding guns I still am super
it's hard.
It's so difficult.
Really hard.
Because I used to close the hand around it like entirely, but that's not how you hold a gun. Like, you can see it in here. You know?
Yeah, it is almost like there's a slant to it in the way that the handle is. So it's like it's just such an odd shape. And then not even considering like a shotgun or a rifle or something you have to hold with two hands. Because then you have to take into account the hand that's like gripping it towards the front of the gun and the trigger hand. So like
Yeah.
And then you have to worry about perspective. Oh man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, guns are difficult. I don't know why I've done this book. I'm actually kind of glad. I need to actually post this on my Patreon. If anybody follows me or is a patron of mine, I need to let you know. I'm going to be taking a short hiatus from Ray Gun probably for that new pitch I'm working on. I want to give that my full attention right now, at least until we get something going with it. So I'm probably not going to be drawing as many guns, so I'll be practicing those so that they're better for issue 4. Yeah, that's a tough one. Switching to monsters. Switching out guns for monsters. There's actually guns in the script for this new one, so not going to get off that easy. But
you liar.
Yeah, and it's tough because this new one, it's a period piece. And so
really?
I'm going to have to do a lot of it's like a true Western, takes place in 18 whatever. So I'll have to do a lot of research for that. That's why Ray Gun's sort of like a future piece, so that I didn't have to actually reference every gun, every car, every setting, because that gets really tedious. Not that I don't enjoy doing it. I do enjoy doing it. I did a book that took place in Mexico one time, and I realized after the first page that I don't know just like what does a Mexican street look like? What do the buildings look like? And in like, I think it was like early 2000s Mexico. Like, I have no idea how to actually make it look like Mexico. I can draw a city street, but how do I convey that this is Mexico? And so I just had to do a lot of research.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's hard with the cultural iconography. Like, it's one thing to draw American City because presumably we've all been to one at least.
Yeah.
But it is harder when you're like, oh, how am I supposed to draw like a shanty town? Like, I don't have immediate reference for that, or I've personally never seen one in real life, so I don't even have the iconography in my head to illustrate it. So
yeah, that's true.
Well, hey, do you guys want to call it a night there? Showcase where we're at with all of our pieces, because I know I think Nate and I are
Yeah,
just
I
at the.
think.
It's probably pretty
Yeah, I
late
think
where
I'm
you
pretty
guys are,
good.
huh?
It's like
I'll show
7:30,
you guys.
7:38.
Yeah, about 8:30.
Here's my
Oh,
speed lines.
dude.
I'm
Yeah,
playing
man.
around with the tools, but yeah.
I love the blurring effects.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me too. I'm gonna take all this stuff out. I'm trying to erase it now, I think,
Mhm.
and just keep it all in the circle. But yeah, I use those big rake brushes I showed you guys earlier for a lot of those, so that the lines went a lot faster than they might have looked,
Yeah.
which was nice.
That's one of my favorite tools when I color is I have a few different like rakes. It just gives
Yeah.
you like a little bit of texture, but also covers so much ground with just a few strokes.
Oh, there's so much you can do. Yeah, they apply it to so many different things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
Todd, those colors you use are also fantastic. Like the shades of
Oh
green
yeah.
with the red and the blue and the
Oh,
yellow.
thanks, man.
I love it. It's so nice.
I play around with a lot of filters just to see what comes up, and I'll oftentimes take my layers and invert all of them just to see what happens. I didn't really do that with this, but sometimes I'll surprise myself and be like, "Oh, I didn't know that was going to be cool looking, but I liked how that turned out." Um, but let's see, yeah. So I'll be excited to get a better look at you guys when it's after this.
Yeah, absolutely. Here, I'll flop over to Nate now as he's touching in with whiteout.
Yeah, I just added a little bit more detail to kind of the splatter effect that I added for the lightning. I added some to his form and I hated it, so whited it out immediately. And I'm happy with it again. Yeah, this is looking pretty good, I think.
It's sharp.
I think this panel with the hand is my favorite. You just like,
Nice.
like that's what you should be looking at. No, I like all of it. I was glad to have this one because I wasn't immediately super happy with the Doug Dodgers and Marvin the Martian piece from last week. Looking at it later, I actually liked it quite a bit, but this one is just a little bit more comfortable since it's like superhero stuff, and I was able to kind of like play around a little bit more with what I'm comfortable in and a world I'm comfortable in. Yeah, I'm happy with this one.
Yeah, you should be, man. I think all of the elements really pulled together. I think the black background with the white lightning effect on it, I think it really helps pop the subjects in each panel, like the track starting block and the hand and the stopwatch. I think it all pops really well.
Yeah, thank you. I keep thinking like in when I look at this kind of like, I guess not directly, I keep thinking it's a satellite. I don't know why. So
Yeah,
I
it does
hope it
have that
doesn't
shape.
satellite.
I think in context it works, but I could totally, if that was the standalone image, someone mistaking
Maybe if
that
it was
for it.
just this panel, these are stars, and this is a satellite, and this is space.
Yeah.
Hopefully it works as a whole thing.
Yeah.
No, it's phenomenal, man. I think you guys nailed the flash on this one.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
Yeah,
I'm
mine,
excited to see how you sort of like tweak yours,
Yeah.
and hopefully get it to a place that you're happy with it.
Yeah.
I think it's looking pretty good. If you
Yeah.
want to keep going with that one, you've got definitely my vote on that.
Yeah.
well,
Yeah, we
thanks.
believe in you, Michael.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, I think I might just, I don't know if I'm going to recreate it or anything just out of the time that would take. Like, I don't know if it's
Mhm.
necessarily worth it. But definitely out of the things that we talked about, just out of lessons learned in creating art and making mistakes and finding out what stylistically works for you.
Right.
I don't think this speed line effect really is cohesive and has a visual continuity with the way I ink. Um, like I think it almost like is contrasting a bit, but maybe that's just how I'm wired. Like maybe it's because it's my own artistic vision that I'm struggling to like reconcile things in it. But
yeah, I mean, you could just add more black maybe to the background to balance out at least the black and whites a little more.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't think that the effect is bad at all.
Yeah, I have to agree with that.
Interesting.
You know, maybe like at the top, the speed lines, if you wanted to lose those and leave it on the ground, that could be kind of powerful.
Yeah,
but
that was something
really,
that...
I mean, the way it blends into, like you were saying before, the way it blends into the car on the, I'm seeing it on the left. I guess maybe it's on the right.
This side?
No, the other one.
This guy, yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm seeing it right. You're seeing it wrong. That's right. Anyway, sorry, viewers. Yeah, the way the speed lines kind of bleed into that form, I think, is really working.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's a total loss at all.
Yeah, I think if I were to redo this, I think I would... You kind of touched upon it a little bit. I would remove the speed lines that aren't on the ground.
That like, that I think looks phenomenal.
Yeah, I think that automatically. Like,
I think if you just lose the top speed lines, it would work really, really well. Yeah, that looks fantastic. You could even just paste that piece of paper on top, finish out the buildings, and
just crop it
honestly. Yeah. I mean, you could like draw the buildings onto it, but yeah, just like do that as like a paste up. Like that's awesome.
Yeah, that might be the move. It's so conflicting, and it is kind of like we touched upon. Like
you're the Flash guy, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. That's what's difficult is too like having that personal connection to the character. It's like it has to be perfect, but in reality, like it doesn't. And like
if we ever do a Superman episode, I'm going to be doing the same thing. I'm going to draw like a really shitty drawing and be like, you know what? I'll just draw something completely different and send it to you guys.
Yeah, it's funny because I mean, like Batman, I almost hold in higher regard. I mean, Batman, I would probably say is my number one superhero just because it's Batman, of course. But the Flash is like the character that like is mine, like the character I chose, as opposed to like recognizing like. But like I don't like for this Batman drawing, it might just be because I've drawn Batman so many times over and over again. Like when we approached this piece, I was just like fluid in it, felt confident in what I was illustrating. This one, just like I don't know if it was the complexity of the running or the like personal attachment to the character, or just even experimenting with the techniques of the speed lines. Like what really threw me with it. But at the end of the day, it's a learning experience, so definitely worth it for that.
Yeah, sometimes walking away from a drawing for a while and getting your mind off it and then coming back, you'd be like, oh, I just now see something I didn't see the rest of the time.
Yeah,
absolutely. I tend to do that a lot. I'll actually take a drawing when I'm watching TV and I'll put it under the drawing so it's in my peripheral vision. And it's sort of like I relax and my brain just starts kind of riffing almost. And I'll start focusing on something that bugs me about the drawing where I'm like, oh, that's the spot that needs to be fixed. That's the spot that needs to be fixed. It's really strange.
That's interesting. Like subconsciously figuring out how to correct a piece.
Yeah, I have performance anxiety when it comes to drawing. And for me, relaxing in some ways is all about it. It's like if I can get my mind to relax, the answer will come to me. It's like the opposite of like if I try to force something, that's not going to work. A lot of times is what I've found.
That's definitely something I was feeling with this piece. Is that performance anxiety and like
is that right?
Yeah, and we were.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, I was actually talking to Nate about that at the beginning before we recorded of the mindset that I almost have to be into ink. And it's usually not that difficult to get into that mindset of like the flow state. But if I'm not in it, I'm not in it. And it's just like impossible to do it.
Yeah.
1 out of 5 men, I guess.
Yeah.
I try and, especially for this show, I try and, at least in the last couple episodes, try and figure out the pencils enough, leave myself enough room to fuck it up on the show, since I am thinking about like this is a thing that we're recording, I might mess up. I try and leave myself a little bit of room to fuck up, but still be happy with the drawing.
Yeah.
And that's where I think this drawing today falls into. I don't think it's as good as it would have been had I just spent, a few hours on a normal day, like in a morning drawing it, but I am happy with it. It fell right within that threshold of like, yeah, it's good enough. This is within the acceptable like margin of where I thought this drawing could go.
Interesting. I would say
good.
you guys have definitely picked far more ambitious drawings than I have. I've tended to stick to like, close-ups of faces so far.
I didn't plan on doing that. But Johnny and Mike have.
Oh, don't
really
you start this. You're the one who goes, look at this warm-up I did. And it's a completely rendered figure with background and side characters.
Those are warm-ups that I actually spent way too long on and didn't start real work until 1 o'clock. So
listen, I'm just saying, don't call out people when you're the one who instigated.
You know what? We'll blame Johnny. He's not here.
Yeah, Johnny's not here, so we can blame Johnny for it.
Blame you, Johnny.
Full background, Johnny.
That's funny.
Looking at you, bud.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, hey, it was fun nonetheless to just hang out and talk Flash and comics and speed lines. The new bane of my existence with you guys. As always, check us out on our social media platforms. It really helps promote all the individual endeavors we're doing, whether it's comics, covers, illustration, animation, album covers, performative dance. Doesn't matter. Give us a check out on Instagram.
That's right.
This has been Mike Pickard, joined by my co-hosts, Nate Wells and Todd Blackwood. Thanks, everybody, for checking it out, and we'll see you guys in the next video.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, guys.